Dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Lugano, welcome to the third edition of the Southern Switzerland Innovation Forum, organized by SUPSI, the University of Applied Sciences and Arts of Southern Switzerland. Our guests today are political, economic and scientific leaders active at regional, national and European level. The forum opens in a few minutes with 3 keynote speakers. The first of our speakers will be Federal Chancellor Simonetta Sommaruga. At the end of her speech, you will be able to ask her some questions. At the center of our program is a panel discussion, which will conclude with your comments and questions. I'd like to remind you that we're streaming live on SUPSI's YouTube channel. Per la moderazione di questo evento non sono da sola, bensì con me c'è il professor Giambattista Ravano, Director Research Development and Knowledge Transfer at SUPSI. Buongiorno professore.
Thank you very much. Buongiorno a tutti. We initiated this debate on innovation almost 7 years ago with the idea that innovation is a concept very well spoken by all, but not very well known. In the second edition, we thought that digitization would have been an important issue to treat, and it was successful too. And now it's time for sustainability, which is in fact a discussion point, very important, and discussed between economy, society, and politics. So these will be the thematics, and very welcome to all. Thank you.
To officially open our forum, I give the floor to Alberto Petruzzella, President of SUPSI.
Onorevole consigliera federale, signora Simonetta Sommaruga, onorevole Presidente del Consiglio di Stato ticinese Emanuele Bertoli, onorevole consigliere di Stato Christian Witta, che ci raggiungerà a minuti, gentili relatrici, egregi relatori, egregi rappresentanti delle associazioni di categoria e delle aziende, care collaboratrici e cari collaboratori della SUPSI, gentili signore, egregi signori, è con grande piacere che vi do il mio più caloroso benvenuto al Forum dell'Innovazione della Svizzera italiana. Questa terza edizione giunge nell'anno del 25° anniversario della fondazione della Scuola Universitaria Professionale della Svizzera italiana, della SUPSI, un'università giovane che sin dagli esordi si è dimostrata pioniera nell'attività di ricerca applicata, dimostrando con i suoi progetti di alto valore scientifico la capacità di confrontarsi e essere competitiva a livello internazionale e capace al contempo di valorizzare le competenze acquisite sul piano territoriale. A dimostrazione di ciò avrete modo di conoscere nel corso del pomeriggio una selezione, seppur limitata, dei circa 700 progetti condotti annualmente nell'ambito della ricerca applicata dei servizi, capaci di mostrare l'ampiezza di intervento della SUPSI e i numerosi ambiti in cui è attiva per rispondere alle innumerevoli sfide emergenti. Sfide globali orientate al miglioramento continuo delle condizioni di vita, dell'ambiente, dei settori socio-economici e produttivi, che interrogano la comunità scientifica, la politica e il mondo economico a livello locale, nazionale e internazionale. Tematiche e dimensioni che ritroviamo qui, oggi, riunite intorno al tavolo del forum, con l'obiettivo di proporre spunti di riflessione, stimolare idee e formulare proposte a sostegno di uno sviluppo sostenibile della società. Perché il ruolo di un'istituzione universitaria è anche quello di favorire il dialogo tra i diversi attori e creare occasioni di incontro come questa, cosciente del fatto che la sostenibilità richiede soluzioni condivise. L'auspicio per tutti i presenti è quindi quello di approfittare al meglio di questa occasione per apportare elementi di valore utili alla propria missione quotidiana. Per quanto riguarda la SUPSI, la sostenibilità sarà privilegiata in ogni ambito di ricerca, così come abbiamo definito all'interno della nostra strategia 2021-2024, e proseguirà la propria attività con l'originalità e la concretezza che la contraddistinguono, nell'intento di confermare il proprio ruolo di agente di cambiamento per i diversi pubblici di riferimento. Il tutto mettendo avanti valori primali, quali il partenariato, valorizzando la creazione di reti e collaborazioni, e continuando quindi a cooperare con aziende, enti, istituzioni e altre realtà accademiche e scientifiche. Un processo in cui si conferma fondamentale l'osmosi esistente tra formazione e ricerca, di primaria importanza per favorire la cosiddetta terza missione, ovvero il trasferimento delle competenze e l'innovazione all'intera società per contribuire in modo coerente al suo sviluppo. Da parte mia non resta che rinnovarvi l'augurio di un proficuo pomeriggio e con grande piacere cedo la parola alla consigliera federale Simonetta Sommaruga, che accogliamo sul palco ringraziandola sentitamente per aver accettato il nostro invito a partecipare. Prego.
Onorevole Presidente del Consiglio di Stato, onorevoli consiglieri di Stato, egregio Presidente, egregio Direttore della SUPSI, cari partecipanti al forum. I am delighted to be here with you for SUPSI's Southern Switzerland Innovation Forum. Here, today's technological advances seem to be right around the corner. Currently, we hear daily news about the atrocities of the war in Ukraine. I was in Ukraine 2 years ago when I was president of the Swiss Confederation. What I experienced there was completely different. Then I felt this pioneering spirit and sense of enthusiasm, especially when I visited the country's first innovation park, Unit City. This was a prototype of a futuristic urban environment, one that provided an ecosystem for innovative entrepreneurship and research. 2 years later, what is left of Unit City? What happened to all those young people who developed innovative solar panels, electric vehicles that moved so fast that you couldn't tell if they were e-bikes or motorbikes? In the 2 years before the war, Ukraine had developed its innovation infrastructure considerably. President Zelensky drove the digitalization process forward in leaps and bounds. His plan was to make all state services available to citizens via an app on their smartphones. This technological progress is now seen as a God-given. For example, the city of Kiev's app, which was initially used to pay for transport tickets or parking, Kiev Digital, was transformed into a life-saving tool in less than 24 hours. The app now warns inhabitants of incoming air raids and directs people to the nearest bomb shelter. In the face of war, Ukrainians surprised the world with their inventiveness, courage, and determination. Ci sono delle conseguenze di questa guerra che sono ben visibili anche da noi. La guerra dimostra quanto l'Europa sia dipendente dal petrolio e dal gas, quanto sia esposta alle scosse geopolitiche e agli interessi, a volte oscuri, di alcuni Stati. Ed è così anche per il nostro Paese. La Svizzera spende ogni anno 8 miliardi di franchi per importare petrolio o gas. La logica conclusione era per me chiara, già prima dell'aggressione russa in Ucraina. Dobbiamo ridurre questa dipendenza e accelerare lo sviluppo delle energie prodotte in Svizzera. La gente ha capito cosa significa essere dipendenti dall'energia fossile e si aspetta la stessa cosa dalla politica. Vuole un approvvigionamento energetico sicuro, più indipendente e pulito. Guardate cosa è successo quest'inverno in Ticino, un periodo di siccità che non si vedeva dall'Ottocento. E l'estate scorsa il nord era allagato mentre gli incendi distruggevano il sud. Non possiamo andare avanti così. Bisogna rallentare il riscaldamento climatico. Tuttavia ciò è in stretta relazione con il nostro approvvigionamento di energia. Il mio dovere è, come Ministra dell'Energia e dell'Ambiente, far rispettare i nostri impegni volti a ridurre i gas a effetto serra e garantire che le persone in Svizzera possano riscaldare le proprie case nel prossimo inverno. Questi due obiettivi sono alla nostra portata, anche se a breve termine vi sono opposizioni. La via da seguire è segnata e collega queste due esigenze. Possiamo ridurre la nostra dipendenza dall'estero e, nel contempo, ridurre le emissioni di CO2 grazie alle energie rinnovabili. È quello che dobbiamo fare ora, in modo rapido e deciso, tutti insieme. Mi ricordo di una discussione con la vice governatrice della California. Mi diceva, "We have a very we can attitude." Mi disse per definire la loro tenacia sommata alla creatività per mettersi all'opera e insistere fino a raggiungere gli obiettivi. Questa we can attitude esiste anche in Svizzera. Il Canton Ticino, per esempio, è ricco di progetti all'avanguardia, da Airolo a Chiasso, progetti non sempre facili da realizzare, ma nei quali ricercatori, autorità e cittadini hanno creduto, progetti che hanno sostenuto e continuano a sostenere. Dal laboratorio di geotermia profonda in Val Bedretto all'acquedotto di Gordola, passando per il Ceresio, primo battello di linea svizzero al 100% elettrico. Questa mattina ho avuto l'occasione di visitare il centro polifunzionale di Pregassona. Il Polis è l'edificio pubblico ticinese con il maggiore impianto fotovoltaico integrato sulla facciata. Cattura energia da tutte le parti, ma senza dare nell'occhio l'estetica e l'eleganza prima di tutto. Questo genere di progetti, i progetti faro, è importante anche per permettere ad alcuni architetti di accantonare i propri pregiudizi sui pannelli solari. Sì, oggi è possibile costruire edifici stupendi e sostenibili con pannelli fotovoltaici prodotti in Svizzera, in Ticino, come testimonia il Polis. Anche in questo caso, come in tanti altri, c'è la presenza di un team della scuola universitaria della Svizzera italiana. Siete ai confini tra la scienza e la pratica. Mettete le vostre idee e il vostro sapere al servizio dell'innovazione sostenibile, lavorata per migliorare la vita di tutti. Questo coraggio per innovare ci serve proprio in questo periodo, in questa fase decisiva verso la decarbonazione. Abbiamo bisogno di personalità in grado di indicarci la via da seguire. Una via non risvolti positiva per la popolazione che possa garantire posti di lavoro in Svizzera e permetterci di esportare le nostre innovazioni. Le cose stanno cambiando, come dimostrano i record degli ultimi tempi. Nel solo mese di febbraio di quest'anno sono state avviate le pratiche per l'installazione di 200.000 pannelli solari, cioè una superficie di 45 campi di calcio. Questo entusiasmo mi dà fiducia. Le tecnologie non solo sono a nostra disposizione, ma costano sempre meno. I pannelli solari o i veicoli elettrici, che nel frattempo stanno vivendo un vero e proprio boom, ne sono testimoni. Il potenziale del fotovoltaico è enorme. L'energia solare potrebbe coprire l'intero consumo di elettricità della Svizzera. Anche l'energia eolica sta avanzando. Il Ticino, ad esempio, ha inaugurato sul San Gottardo uno dei parchi eolici più alti d'Europa. Il vantaggio dell'eolico è di poter garantire una forte produzione durante i mesi invernali, quando il fabbisogno energetico è massimo. Ma soprattutto in Svizzera abbiamo il nostro oro bianco, l'energia idroelettrica. In occasione di una tavola rotonda, I cantoni, gli esercenti e diverse organizzazioni ambientaliste hanno elencato 15 progetti di centrali che potrebbero essere realizzati in tempi brevi. E per evitare che passino 20 anni prima di poter realizzare una diga, ho proposto una legge che permetterà di accelerare le procedure per la costruzione di grandi centrali di accumulazione e di grandi impianti eolici. Anche la costruzione di impianti solari sarà semplificata. Per investire nelle energie prodotte in Svizzera sono a disposizione quasi 12 miliardi di franchi fino al 2030, una sicurezza di investimento molto importante. Dobbiamo andare avanti. Se vogliamo essere climaneutrali, dopo il no alla legge sul CO2, sono giunta alla conclusione che la politica deve sostenere la popolazione che vuole vivere rispettando il clima e rinunciare a misure che sembrano punizioni. Questa filosofia costituisce la base del nuovo progetto di legge, perché una cosa è certa. Nelle regioni periferiche la gente dipende spesso dall'automobile e rispetto a chi vive in città ha meno accesso ai trasporti pubblici. Non voglio contrapporre l'automobile ai trasporti pubblici, ma facilitare il trasferimento da un mezzo all'altro. Voglio anche sostenere la mobilità elettrica finanziando le stazioni di ricarica. Per quanto riguarda il riscaldamento, il nostro piano prevede di incoraggiare la popolazione a sostituire i riscaldamenti a nafta o a gas. È un passaggio fondamentale. Se sostituiamo il nostro riscaldamento a gasolio con un dello stesso tipo, perdiamo almeno 20 anni. Non possiamo però lasciare il peso della transizione sulle spalle della gente. Grazie alle nuove disposizioni previste, abbiamo 4 miliardi per sostituire i vecchi sistemi di riscaldamento a nafta o a gas, per rinnovare le case, così che la popolazione possa risparmiare. Questi 4 miliardi sommati ai quasi 12 miliardi ci permettono di investire nelle energie prodotte nel nostro Paese. Seguendo lo spirito della We Can attitude, possiamo avanzare molto rapidamente. E se questo passa non è sufficiente, ne faremo altri. Ma questo non è un motivo per restare con le mani in mano. Bisogna riconoscere la gravità della situazione. La sicurezza d'approvvigionamento elettrico è una delle sicurezze più importanti per il nostro Paese e la sicurezza non è mai gratuita. However, you, ladies and gentlemen, also have entirely different concerns. And the Federal Council is well aware of this. Our relationship with the EU is crucial. What is at stake here is also a kind of security, the assurance that we will still be able to pursue joint projects with Europe's top researchers, the certainty that mobility between the various universities and research centers in Europe will remain possible. We understand that while funding is certainly important, it is not the only factor, it is also the network that plays a crucial role. Research and innovation in our country would be faced with serious obstacles without this network. Here too, we seek pragmatic solutions that are beneficial to both partners. It is important to interact with the political forces and with society on a continuous basis and to make your voices heard. Your solutions can also make a huge difference in energy and climate policy. SUPSI rightly prides itself on its ability to network and establish project synergies between various partners, projects, and disciplines. As an agent of change, SUPSI can be said to be embodiment of the we can attitude. Thank you. Grazie.
Grazie mille, consigliere federale Simonetta Sommaruga. And now we would like to open the discussion with you. Questions and comments can be asked in Italian and in English. Please introduce yourself with your name and your function. Do you have any questions or comments? Please. The microphone is coming.
Luca Reggiani, SUPSI DFA, Dipartimento Formazione e Apprendimento. Grazie mille per la toccante testimonianza anche dell'Ucraina. La domanda è molto semplice. Non si può raggiungere la sostenibilità senza, anche con delle buone leggi, delle ottime tecnologie verdi, senza l'educazione. Forse nel suo intervento è mancato un aggancio un po' a questo anello che secondo me è il principale. Senza una buona educazione, senza formare nuove generazioni a questa cultura della sostenibilità, le nuove tecnologie, le tecnologie verdi, le buone leggi probabilmente servono a poco.
Sì, grazie. Forse non ho dimenticato l'educazione perché forse ho pensato che qui al SUPSI non bisogna menzionarlo specialmente perché è così evidente, no? Però lei ha completamente ragione che l'educazione, la formazione è qualcosa che è importantissimo, che penso che la Svizzera è già abbastanza forte, però non dimenticare che deve rimanere così e anche aumentare anche quello che io c'è molta gente che mi dice che abbiamo bisogno di manodopera adesso. E questa è piuttosto la formazione, però l'educazione anche per capire le cose, che cosa succede. Però adesso in questo momento io ho l'impressione che la popolazione capisce molto bene che cosa succede, forse anche meglio che la politica, perché adesso questo cambio, ridurre la dipendenza e fare qualche cosa per la sicurezza dell'approvvigionamento e anche per la protezione del clima, che questo è possibile. E bisogna muoversi, però c'è la tecnologia, ci sono i soldi. Quello che ho detto sui pannelli solari come esempio mostra che la gente vuole questo cambio. E adesso la politica, anche tutti devono fare che sia possibile. Io sono contenta che abbiamo fatto anche i lavori preparativi, come ho detto, i 12 miliardi che sono lì, i 4 miliardi per anche il cambiamento dei riscaldamenti, anche i soldi adesso, c'è una sicurezza di investimento, però bisogna adesso che tutti vanno in questa direzione e così possiamo fare molte buone cose per il nostro paese e anche per il clima.
Grazie mille. Next one. Professor Avano. Filippo is coming with the microphone. Thank you.
I'm sorry to put you a difficult question, but I think it's necessary to put this question. At the EU level, the European Union decided to put the nuclear energy as one so-called ecological friendly type of energy. What is the position of the Swiss governments, if there is any?
Well, this is a decision which has been taken in the European Union and not in Switzerland. We do not have a position to that because we do not have to take position to that. On the one hand, we are, of course, very interested to have a common standard, what is ecological and what is not ecological in the finance issue, because people want to know whether they make investments, whether they are ecological or not. So, of course, for us it's important to have this kind of guidance also. On the other hand, Switzerland probably cannot make this own guidance and this own standards away from other standards. Either we take those of US or EU or maybe others, but there are not so many. And the question will be whether our finance market wants to take over what has been decided in Europe. And then, of course, they take what has been decided, or they want to make some special decisions for Switzerland. There are advantages for the one and for the other, of course. What I can imagine is with also, I'm sorry, but with this war in Ukraine as well, the awareness that, I mean, also nuclear power, we are dependent completely, 100% of the uranium imported. So probably maybe the feeling that nuclear power is something that is in our country, it's einheimisch. I cannot find the word in any other language. Sorry? Okay. So maybe that the fact that also in Switzerland our uranium comes partly from Russia makes people maybe more aware that also this technology makes us dependent of importation. But the decided in EU has been taken, and probably also you know what was the background of this decision.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Please.
Christoph Boitler from Climeworks. Thank you, Federal Council. You said in your talk that we need to adopt a can-do attitude. And can you quickly elaborate what is the can-do attitude that Swiss climate policy should take in your view? Thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, if I say it in a very short way, when I say we have we can attitude is that we can decarbonization, we can climate protection, we can do that, and we can achieve that. And I mean, which other country is in a better position than our country to do that? I mean, we have the money, we have the technologies, we have the research, as we see here. You are also a representative of a startup from ETH. I mean, we have the people who want to do that. So which other country is in a better position? And if I look at especially our energy or electricity production, we have hydro production combinable with solar production. It's the best combination you can have, and also wind. But this is the best combination. So I think if we make really, we put that together, it should, maybe there is one thing, Switzerland is not a country that goes very fast. Sometimes it's also an advantage that we do not go so fast in one and other directions. But in this situation, and our federal state has many advantages, but maybe also in this issue, sometimes it's not also make things faster. When I see for solar production, for example, I see what is at the federal level, but then you have the cantonal rules, and you have at the communal state also the specific rules. So that makes sometimes things complicate. So I hope now that there is so much pressure coming from our population that everybody, whether at a city level or at cantonal level or at federal level, everybody is now looking for the best solutions and to make that what people want to do us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Antonella Santuccione Ciada. I am the co-founder and pro bono CEO of the Women's Brain Project, but this question comes from my other role, which is the Vice Presidency of EU Research. You've touched on a very important point, which is the collaboration that is needed for Swiss researchers with other institutions, and we know what it is, the hurdle at the moment with us being not included in the Horizon 2020 programs, etc. My question is, which are the tactics in place for the next 12 months or 2 years, such as we can solve this issue as soon as possible and guarantee the Swiss researcher, the network and the prestige deriving from the Horizon 2020 participation? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question. It's not the first time I have this question when I go to a university. Well, you know about the Federal Council's decision last year to stop the Verhandlungen.
Negotiation
with thank you, European Union about the institutional framework. So of course, this stopping these negotiations had some other effects, and which are not, they were not surprising. I mean, it's not that we didn't know about that, but of course, this decision of Federal Council has made relations more complicated now with the European Union. And at the same time, we are very much aware, especially as we say about Horizon, how important this is. And what I said before, I mean, it's not only a question of money. It's really the question of network, of change, of mobility, and having the best researchers. And I am also aware that at the moment for university, there's also the problem that maybe researchers, they hesitate to come to Switzerland because they say, if I want to be in a big project within Horizon, so I do not know how it's going on, so I prefer to go in another country. So this insecurity is very negative. I can tell you as a Minister of Energy, not having negotiations about an agreement on electricity is also quite a difficulty. Well, you know that the Federal Council is trying to look for other ways to find a solution with EU, also to find a solution for institutional questions, and so also solutions for Horizon, and solutions for energy sector. What I can imagine is that also, I'm so sorry, but with this war, maybe in our country, the awareness that we are so much, I would not say only depending from each other, but I mean also Switzerland, we are defending, we are fighting for the same values. It's more than economic and research relations. It's much more. I mean, we are defending peace in Europe together, and we are defending human rights, and we are defending democracy, and we want that this war stops. So my hope is that maybe also this situation in our heads and also in our political decisions, maybe we are more aware that this kind of being really a part of Europe brings us closer together, and maybe there is also more power now in Switzerland to find solutions and not looking about every small detail probably we do not like, but really to have now big steps to go towards that. I cannot promise you, but it's my will anyway to go in this direction.
Thank you. We do have time for a couple of questions more, if you agree. Thank you.
Fabrizio Membrini, Associazione Ticino Energia, ha accennato all'importanza di supportare tutti i cittadini che vogliono muovere dei passi in direzione dell'efficienza delle energie rinnovabili. Lo trovo molto importante, quello che anche nel nostro piccolo cerchiamo di fare. Talvolta però temo che non sia sufficiente e penso che sia importante introdurre anche dei principi di causalità relativi per esempio all'utilizzo di energie fossili, quindi un'internalizzazione dei costi per esempio, fare in modo che quello che paghiamo per le energie fossili corrisponda al reale impatto che hanno. Trova che ci sia ancora spazio per combinare da una parte il supporto, dall'altra però una maggiore realtà dei prezzi, malgrado la recente votazione sulla legge sul CO2. Grazie.
Sì, grazie. Io penso che l'esperienza che abbiamo fatto con la legge sul CO2 ci ha mostrato che, penso che era una buona legge, tutti lo dicono dopo il no della popolazione, però questa legge voleva mettere un po' il prezzo su quelli che utilizzano, per esempio con il ticket per l'aereo, quelli che utilizzano le energie fossili che pagano anche un po' il prezzo. E questa è la mia lettura, la maggioranza della gente si sentiva piuttosto punita. Io ho sentito anche giovani che hanno detto: adesso voi anziani avete lasciato questo mondo con i problemi del clima e adesso noi giovani che vogliamo fare forse un volo, viaggiare un po', noi adesso dobbiamo pagare ancora sul biglietto il ticket up cape. Allora si sentivano puniti, e anche quelli, come ho detto, che non hanno i trasporti pubblici. E io penso che adesso per il prossimo passo dobbiamo cambiare, dobbiamo sostenere. Volete cambiare il riscaldamento? Siamo qui, aiutiamo. E penso che questa è qualcosa, la politica climatica funziona solo anche quando è sociale. E lei dice che in teoria è chiaro che se si mette il prezzo sul CO2, sarebbe quello che utilizza, paga, è molto chiaro, è molto, sì, si capisce, però socialmente questo non funziona, perché ci sono quelli che hanno bisogno di qualche cosa e dopo devono pagare. Allora penso che la politica climatica deve essere anche una politica sociale. Questo lo proviamo adesso a fare con la nuova legge sul CO2, vediamo poi le reazioni. Bisogna anche sapere adesso, la prossima legge sul CO2 che facciamo sarà la legge fino al 2030. Non è la legge per la neutralità climatica, però abbiamo bisogno di una legge per questi prossimi 5 anni, perché può entrare in gioco sì, dopo il 2025. Questo passo dobbiamo fare così che sostenere la gente e investire nell'infrastruttura. Dopo il 2030 penso adesso sarebbe un po' difficile di dire come si funziona, perché c'è anche delle soluzioni globali in Europa che bisogna vedere, però il prossimo passo deve veramente sostenere la gente e spero che arriviamo anche con il Parlamento di fare questo prossimo passo.
Thank you. I've seen one more raised hands.
Sì, buongiorno. Lorenzo Ambrosini, Fondazione Agire. La mia domanda è simile a quella del mio precedente Fabrizio, però si declina un po' di più sulle imprese. Noi vediamo dei tremendi sforzi dal mondo imprenditoriale in direzione della sostenibilità ambientale e sociale. Purtroppo però i benefici di questi sforzi sono spesso o esterni o solo a lungo termine. Il nostro sistema economico attuale purtroppo le premia ancora troppo poco. Vediamo che sono dei premi molto legati al profitto finanziario. Allora, come possiamo fare in modo che ci sia un meccanismo di attivazione, anche in senso contabile, di questi sforzi economici e sociali nelle imprese? Grazie.
Sì, grazie. Io direi che abbiamo anche oggi degli strumenti per fare un vantaggio per quelli che fanno degli sforzi, anche le imprese. C'è la possibilità, per esempio, che per le grandi imprese di non dover pagare la tasse sul CO2 se fa degli sforzi. Con la nuova legge vogliamo aprire questo questa possibilità per tutte le ditte. Una cosa che penso cambierà forse già da presto è che i prezzi per l'energia vanno a aumentare. Questo ci mette anche delle questioni difficili, anche nel livello sociale, però i prezzi aumenteranno, non penso che ritorneranno subito. Aumentano di una parte perché c'è questa insicurezza e questo fa aumentare i prezzi, e poi forse anche il gas, se non si vuole più prendere il gas della Russia, c'è anche un po' meno gas sul mercato, anche il petrolio è una situazione al momento direi un po' difficile, però questo può cambiare ancora per gli Stati Uniti, hanno detto che adesso vogliono produrre di più, però i prezzi che aumentano fanno anche più motivazione anche per fare degli sforzi, perché quelli che investono nell'efficacia possono anche risparmiare i costi. Però è una questione che bisogna sempre guardare come possiamo fare che quelli che fanno lo sforzi non siano puniti alla fine e lo Stato sostiene solo quelli che non hanno fatto mai niente. Anche la stessa cosa anche per le case. Mi hanno detto se adesso c'è un sosteniamo più quelli che cambiano il riscaldamento dalla nafta o dal gas per qualcosa d'altro, e quelli che l'hanno già fatto non avevano questi soldi. Difficile, però penso che quello che possiamo fare o dobbiamo fare è veramente andare avanti, e qualche volta non è la giustizia che è dappertutto, però i prezzi che aumentano danno ancora un mezzo per andare avanti per tutti.
Grazie mille, consigliera federale Simonetta Sommaruga, grazie davvero per il suo intervento. E per le sue risposte chiare e concrete. It was a pleasure and an honor. Thank you. And now let's move on with the next two keynote speakers. Giambattista Ravano would like to introduce the next topics.
Yes, thank you very much for giving me the floor. In fact, the two speakers now will introduce two different arguments, which are mainly an innovative case of entrepreneurship, but in the direction of more scientific, if you want, and in the other in a more economic and entrepreneurial field. But both enlarge the views on the concept, and let us then discuss about the concept of sustainability in innovation at very large angle. So thank you very much, and I let you the floor for the introduction.
I'd like to welcome Dr. Antonella Santuccione Ciada, pro bono CEO and co-founder of the Women's Brain Project and head stakeholder engagement Alzheimer's disease at Biogen. Buongiorno e benvenuta.
Thank you very much. And it is an honor and a privilege for me to be today with you here. Thank you for those who have invited me, but also thank you for the very touching words that we've heard from our Federal Councillor, because I want to start with a thought. I am a neuroscientist that has been educated by an ETH professor, Professor Marita Shakna, together with Ukrainian mentors and Russian. So I have learned back then how to become what I am today from a diverse and peaceful scientific environment. So I really hope with all my heart that our brains as a collective will be used not to foster any war, but to foster science for the well-being of mankind. With this, I would like to present to you why we believe as a collective of scientists that to consider sex and gender differences, it is a way to foster innovation, to promote sustainability within medicine and healthcare systems. Sustainability, it is to leave a world for those future generations which do not have to pay the burden of our own way of being as well as mistakes. And we think that it goes also via ensuring well-being and health for everybody, as stated by the Sustainable Developmental Goals, as well as quality education. We discussed also about this just a few seconds ago. Gender equality, and finally, the collaboration between industries to foster innovation. These are my disclosure. I am here to represent this organization where I work as the CEO pro bono since 5 years, and actually today it is our birthday, so it's a Swiss birthday for the Women's Brain Project. And I'm also, my official employer, it is Biogen, where I act as head of stakeholder for Alzheimer's disease. I'm also the vice president of EU Research, and I apologize for not having this in my official disclosure. Now, let's have a look at the condition of women in Switzerland. What we know is that life expectancy, it is getting more and more for each of us, but specifically for women. The question it is, how do these women age? Is it just to live longer, a guarantee of living better? And unfortunately, when we look also at Swiss number, what we know is that the female population, it is the one which is more confronted with disabilitating condition like the one related to our mobility system, let's call it like this, our mobility apparatus, but also depression. And finally, when we look at the numbers of dementia in Switzerland, we can say that majority is unfortunately female. When we look at the use of therapies, of medicines for the Swiss population, what we see is that when the population get older, starting to age, the number of painkillers used by female, it is almost double than the one used by men. And the same it is true for sleeping and anxiety medication. Now the question is, it's just a matter of numbers or there is something else behind it? Well, we can say, when we look at what we do at the Women's Brain Project, is that most of the brain and mental diseases have a bias, meaning that we know that there is a higher prevalence and incidence of certain pathologies in the female population, such as what I've mentioned, dementia, depression, anxiety, migraine. We have that almost only female experience what it is so-called NMDA receptor encephalitis, which is a condition deriving from antibodies produced by benign tumor that put the brain in flame, if you want. And it has been just diagnosed in 2007, so it's a newly recognized disease. Before, the women were put in a psychiatric ward, they were young female, they would have died because they would have been considered like hysteric or whatever. So it is time to ameliorate quite a lot within medicine. We also have male bias diseases such as Parkinson or ALS and eventually midlife stroke. And as I said, the question that we pose, is it just a matter of numbers or is it something more? Well, we know in fact that for these biases, there are specific female or male risk factors. We know that also the biomarkers which characterize those conditions might be more male-specific or more female-specific. We know that symptoms differ. I can tell you, when I was working as a medical doctor in a ward for psychiatry for several years, very often I had the confrontation of female that were coming to my observation to be diagnosed with dementia, but that at the beginning they were treated for depression because the symptoms were not recognized as belonging to dementia, but rather depression. The same is true for multiple sclerosis, which is for younger female. They are usually told you have stress in your family, maybe you have a problem with your husband, maybe it's a labyrinthitis, maybe it is just stress. Finally, after 2-3 years, it comes out, this is a multiple sclerosis. So you understand that time to diagnose, it is essential for brain and mental diseases. What we say, it is time is brain. And while in oncology, we can diagnose a tumor with maybe less than 4 weeks if you are in a highly specialized center, and you can even have by genotyping your protein expression a targeted chemotherapy. For brain and mental diseases, it takes years to get diagnosed. This is not sustainable. That's why we have to change the pattern. It also goes to drug response and to treatment adherence. We know that there are profound, significant differences in the way the drugs are acting, but also in the safety profile of this medication. And finally, there is the aspect related to behavior. You will not believe it, but I have a collaboration with a startup also from the ETH, and they develop Google for cognitive training. And when we have to design the clinical trial, majority of the elderly lady, they don't want to use the Google. And the question is why? Because they have the friseur, and they don't want to ruin their hairstyle. They don't want to put the Google on. These are things that might sound funny, but they impact the outcome of a study because you don't have enough representation of this population if you don't make it friendly user for them. So this is an example of what I was telling you when it's about Parkinson. There are profound differences in the way those diseases manifest if a woman or a man. I won't go in detail, it's too medical, but just to give you a practical example, the man will be more prone to have the blockade that is typical of Parkinson. The female will have more tremor, for example. For men, we have more of cognitive decline. The woman will have more of a depression symptomatic. And these things need to be recognized in the clinic and in the diagnosis. These are new concepts. The same is true for Alzheimer's. We said it, more women have Alzheimer's disease, almost 70%. 70% of the female population is caregiving, which is a burden for the society because caregiving means women are not working, they stay home and they provide care. But it also puts them at risk of being socially isolated and therefore being more at risk of developing dementia when they will be older. So it's a vicious circle, if you want. We also have differences, as I mentioned already, in symptoms, but also in the deposition of certain biomarkers in the brain. And we need to study them, we need to characterize them. Now, the question I want to pose is whether those differences are in fact taken into account when we do develop drugs or we do design novel technology. The answer is not enough. And I can give you some examples. Actually, the whole medical field, it is designed for a male body, and women are considered like small men. We aren't small men. We are different with a different biology, which is underlying our way of functioning, but most importantly, our way of getting disease. And we need to understand to get better treatment, sustainable, also for the healthcare system. I will tell you why the sustainability part is very important. This is a striking number. It's a data that comes from the General Account Office. It's an obsolete data. It's 2001. And why is it obsolete? Because nobody dared to do a similar analysis since then. I'm looking for funds to do this piece of research myself. The question is, how many drugs have been withdrawn from the market until 2001? And this report shows that out of 10 drugs withdrawn from the market, 8, it was because they had major lethal side effect in the female population. It means women died. It means we have been wasting 20 years of research in the garbage. We have been wasting billions of dollars as well in the garbage. And the poor person that maybe was benefiting of this therapy, because I'm sure someone was receiving a real benefit out of this treatment, won't have the drug anymore on the apotheke shelf, on the pharmacy shelf. So, as I said, this is dated 2001. Nobody looked afterwards what happened, but it should induce us to a reflection. This is not sustainable, and we can't afford this. Regulators are starting to pay attention. I've worked for 4.5 years at Swissmedic as a regulator myself. I was always the clinical reviewer that posed always the funny question to the developer. So what is happening between men and women? Why do men have more headache and women have more bellyache, or the other way around? And what happened, surprisingly, this was a shocking morning for me, 2019, I opened my computer, I just checked the news, New York Times, and it shows up that one preventive drug for HIV, so HIV, it is a serious concern, it's not a joke, was approved only for the male population. I was, what? How can that be? I was a regulator myself in the past. And well, I can tell you, the regulator did a good job because there was not even one woman included in the clinical trial. So they've said, if you don't provide me the evidences, that works also in the female, how can I prove it for the female population? But this is an alarm telling that finally regulators are starting to consider those differences carefully. And which is the solution? The solution, I'm proud to share with you, it is also the work that it is provided by this organization that is called the Women's Brain Project. As I said, big day, birthday day, and what we want to do, we want to bring the concept of Swiss precision into medicine. This is our motto. We want to foster precision medicine approaches that will become, let's say, will transform healthcare system and medicine towards sustainability. It's a team of scientists. We have a consultant in the room, we have engineers, we have patients, we have experts in communication. Most of us are working pro bono, showing the passion and the dedication that we are putting behind this cause. And we want to, of course, focus on brain and mental diseases, because this is where the highest unmet need in the whole medical field exists. And this is a matter of fact. The lower funds go to neuroscience for research, and in terms of pipeline and development, it is where nobody's really investing because there is no return of investment. It is not like oncology. If you want to put your money into neuroscience, it's very, very highly risky. So that's why we focus on this. We want to solve the problem, and we think that analyzing sex and gender differences, it is the gateway to precision medicine. We want to create an institute, a research institute for precision medicine, analyzing sex and gender differences. We want to do it in Switzerland, and we will do it. I don't know when, but we will. We act, in fact, as an institute. We are an association, but we have to have the upgrade to the institute, because if we want to play the role into fundraising where the government provides funds, or where Horizon 2020 or anything else, you need to prove that you are an academic or institute organization. Otherwise, we already act and work as a research institute. Here you see our outcome, that it is about generating facts. We are really science-based, and we say these are the differences existing, we need to take it into account when we develop solutions. So we publish science, we write books, we organized proudly the 3rd International Forum on Women's Brain and Mental Health. That was last time in 2020. We're going to have the next one in 2023. We are, of course, generating the education part. We have been pioneering, and we have transformed the mindset. And the beauty of it is that when Big Pharma comes and knocks at your door and tells, can you please advise us on our pipeline, how to consider sex and gender differences? Then you say, bingo, we made it. Because we want to transform collectively. We don't want to go and say you're doing wrong. No, we believe in co-creation, and that's the magic. So we do lectures, we do educational course, we educate also to mental health, because of course we also have mental health in our heart. And somehow this turns into few awards that we are starting to collect, so we're also very proud of this phenomenon. It was new to me, but I have to say it helps a lot. I want to give you some numbers of what we do. This is a paper that is not yet published, but you can see the number of publications that since the last 20 years basically are considering sex and gender differences. And since 2015, when we started to talk about it, actually we see an exponential growth, especially in neuroscience, of publications that are finally addressing sex and gender differences in the work they do. And we can say proudly we have been the one that really made the noise. At the beginning, we had the establishment saying, I mean, even my professor, you know, I was coming from a University of Zurich, Frau Santuccione, mussten wir wirklich das so machen? Wo sind die Unterschiede zwischen Frauen und Männern? Where are the differences between men and women? And now when I meet him, he says, oh, I'm learning so much from the work you do. And these are the little success of the daily job that we are doing. We also believe in innovation. Of course, we have plenty of collaboration. I will try to go very fast. But again, this is a spin-off of ETH, analyzing basically the performance of our brain with a 10 minutes test that you can download on your iPhone or your iPad, and it will tell you whether you have mild cognitive impairment, Alzheimer's disease, or if you have an healthy brain. 10 minutes test on your iPhone. What's going to be next? I won't tell you, because we also have a solution for that, but that's not the core of my topic. But what I've done, I said, Johannes, that's the name of the founder of this startup. Can you please ask your algorithm and classifier if you can tell me if the brain of the performer is a female brain or a male brain? And you will not believe it, but the classifier with almost 70% plus accuracy can distinguish pretty well, this is a woman doing the test, this is a man doing the test. Why is this important? Not because we have to understand who can park the car better, we know. We need to use these learnings to implement the solutions in the way we do clinical trial design, because if these differences exist, they need to be captured in clinical endpoint to make good drugs. And that's what we do. I mean, we work, for example, with the group of The Economist Impact. We're financing a research there to understand on a health modeling system, which is the impact of not considering sex and gender differences when we develop drugs. We are creating the first, in my knowledge, and I think that's really the case, the first differentiated patient journey. Now, what it is a patient journey? The patient journey, it is the benchmark for pharmaceutical industry, for policymaker, for any stakeholder to understand the journey of the patient. When the symptom starts, where is my patient diagnosed, when it's diagnosed, who takes care of the patients. And around this, you develop the whole drug positioning, if you want. Now, if it's true that those differences exist between men and women, also the patient journey will be a different one, right? And we want to then leverage the learning to create platform for patients to benefit of this learning and provide services. Finally, another thing that we are proudly doing, and again, we have been the first in the world to do something like this, and we will continue. This is a round table that it's going to be now the third one. We will try to do it around the World Health Summit, which will be held in Berlin. And we bring regulators, government, funding agencies around the table to discuss how can we consider sex and gender differences to ameliorate drug development. And we can say that FDA came, that BfArM came, we've had the Canadian agency, the World Health Organization, we had EMA. We didn't have Swissmedic. I have to call my previous colleagues once again and say, this time you have to come, and it's going to be 2022 in Berlin. So why we want to do this? At the end of the day, I think it's clear. Sustainability, we said it. It's also about health, health for all. It's about gender equality. It is about innovation and collaboration. I strongly believe that mankind can collaborate together. And if we do this, we can increase with our work the drug efficacy response. We can improve the safety profile of the drugs we bring to the patients. Let's look at the vaccine. We know, for example, that with the vaccine, the female were the one that experienced most of the side effects. The question is, if we would have considered this from the beginning onwards, should we have had these women having all these side effects? Yes or no? I'm sure the answer is not, but we have to do it. Then we want to do this to increase the adherence and compliance to a therapy, because at the end of the day, if you don't produce and develop good drugs, the patient doesn't take the drug. And I can tell you, I've worked as a psychiatrist for 7 years when I was prescribing antipsychotic to my patients. Most of the time, I hope that this doesn't stay in stone, it was found in the garbage. They didn't want to take it. You need to make good drugs if you want to help people. It's a matter of fact. And an antipsychotic treat the symptoms. They don't treat the cause of the neurological disease. That's why we have to foster innovation in neuroscience. And finally, we want to reduce the cost associated to the failure of drugs development. And again, I'm pretty sure that many information around potential successful drugs are lost because those little nuances are not considered in the development of things we do. Yeah, this is the team of people. Actually, this is an old photo. The team is much bigger. It is diverse. We are spread all over the world, from Canada to America to, well, now the situation with the war changed things, but we had also representative, of course, in Ukraine and Australia and India, and you name it, you have it. So thank you so much for your attention. This is how you can follow our work. And yeah, I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Santuccione, not only for your intervention, but also for your project. We will discuss with you later, more later during the panel discussion. And I'd like to remind you that you can ask questions at the end of our panel discussion. So if you have questions or comments, please write them down and you will have the opportunity to ask them later. And now we're coming to our last speaker before the roundtable. Please welcome Mr. Christoph Boitler, Head of Climate Policy at Climeworks.
Fast. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the SUPSI team for organizing, and thank you, Federal Council, for your very good remarks. I want to talk about another crisis that requires innovation. I want to talk about climate. But let me start by saying who we are and what we do. Our company is called Climeworks, and we filter CO2 from the atmosphere. Now that sounds a bit mad, but I hope I can now let you know why this is necessary. Most of you will know, especially after the IPCC report came out on Monday on the topic. So let's jump straight in. So unfortunately, to solve the climate crisis, which means to stay below 2 degrees Celsius, warming ideally below 1.5, having shorter showers and driving a Tesla is not enough. You should absolutely do that, but we need to do more. What we need to do is to get from currently 40 billion tons of emissions to zero as fast as possible. In fact, we won't make it to zero in time. We are rapidly depleting our carbon budget. So the idea is that we try and get to net zero emissions in 2050, which means we have to thereafter enter a period of net negative emissions. That means, in simple words, we have to clean up our atmosphere. We have to launch the largest cleanup operation there is. This is not my opinion, this is the opinion of the world's climate scientists. And so what we need to do is we need to reduce our emissions more drastically than we currently do, but in addition, we already know we need to remove gigatons, so billions of tons of CO2 and other greenhouse gases from the atmosphere every year. And we think at Climeworks we have developed one of the solutions that can help there if we scale them up in time. That's a big if. So this is about innovation, society, and policy. I hope I have made clear in the first slide that this is not about the climate or the environment. This is about us, because again, stable climate means stable societies, means peace, and means flourishing economies. So this is the world map of net zero climate goals, commitments, and countries who have achieved net zero, so it's a very small amount. So the good news is this slide was blank 4 years ago because we didn't have countries with net zero goals in law, the green proportion, or in a target or in debate. So politics is moving ahead here, which is really, really good. Why is that so important? Because it's a very complicated topic, but essentially what we're trying to build here is for companies a world in which you cannot offset your emissions anymore. You don't have anything to avoid. You either emit something or you have to take it out of the atmosphere. That's what net zero means. So the market of offsets, of carbon offsets, is done at net zero. And that's, again, why we need to develop solutions to bring CO2 out of the atmosphere. This is our solution. So at Climeworks, we have developed a machine that can literally chase the needle in the haystack. So we're chasing 420 parts per million. That's the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. How we do this, so we have developed a highly selective filter that only attracts for CO2, and we pull massive amounts of air through that machine, and the filter only catches the CO2 molecules. And once the filter is saturated, it's about after 45 minutes, we close this box and we heat it up to 100 degrees, and the CO2 becomes, unsticks from the filter. And then we can do two things. One is we can use the CO2 for products that need CO2. One example is, Federal Council Sommaruga has talked about the flight ticket surcharge. Aviation is an industry that needs liquid fuels that are based on hydrocarbon chains. And the only way to avoid an emission from aviation is if we take the CO2 out of the air first. We can then combine it with green hydrogen. We can build a drop-in fuel that once we burn it, re-emits the CO2 into the atmosphere. So we're mimicking nature, and we can, what we call, close the carbon cycles, where we can avoid fossil emissions or defossilize. Also, why do I talk about desorbing CO2 at 100 degrees Celsius? Why is that important? If you are in the business of taking CO2 out of the air, you must make sure that you can run it on renewable energy. Otherwise, you put more CO2 into or there's a danger that you put more CO2 in the atmosphere than you take out of it. So with this system, we are already 90% efficient. So for every ton of CO2 we take out of the air, we only emit 100 kilograms. The other thing we can do and we need to do, I showed in my initial slide, is we need to clean the atmosphere. We need to achieve carbon removal or negative emissions. And we have developed a system with our partners in Iceland, they're called CarbFix, where we take the CO2 out of the atmosphere, we use renewable energy, in this case geothermal, but most importantly we also use the waste heat from the geothermal power plant, and then we mineralize the CO2 underground. So we put the CO2 into the ground where it turns into stone. Why is this important? Well, first of all, it's a proven and tested storage method, so the CO2 is locked away for many, many millennia, forever, essentially, right? And if you need to clean the atmosphere, if you want to clean something, you want to make sure it stays clean as long as possible so the CO2 doesn't come back. But the other thing is, it's also intuitively understandable that this is something that can work, right? And if the CO2 turns into stone, we can all understand, okay, we have this problem solved. And that's the third part. We have to bring society along, right? We have left the window where we can just reduce emissions. We now need to clean the atmosphere. So it's also important that we build this in a way that is that gets the support of society. And again, we think we have delivered a very good method here. This, of course, took time and will take some more time. As said in the beginning, it depends on how fast we can scale this up. So Climeworks, again, is a spin-off of a Swiss university, in this case ETH Zurich. Was founded in 2009. And we had a lot of world's first and so forth. And at the moment, our world's first is we have just opened the largest direct air capture plant in the world. Again, we've done that before in 2017 because we're usually the first. It's also the largest. But that's at 4,000 tons, right? And in my first slide, I've shown that we need to remove billions of tons. So we have a long way to go. Obviously, we can't do it alone. We also need to plant trees. We need to find other solutions. And the good news is they all exist, but not at scale, but they all exist, so we can scale them up to take CO2 out of the atmosphere. What we bring to the table here is basically small size. So if you want to plant, if we want to solve the problem by planting trees, you need 3 planets worth of trees. We only have 1. The same amount of CO2 we can filter out of the air if we use 20% of the surface area of Iceland, which is roughly the size of Switzerland. But just to get an idea, 98% of this surface area will be covered by solar panels. So getting the energy to remove it is the second key in this puzzle piece. But it enables us to scale it down, to make it as efficient as possible so we can solve the problem on this planet. And again, also we don't need arable land. Now, I'm very proud to announce, or it's not an announcement, we announced it on Tuesday, but we've just raised 600 million in capital. So this is the largest raise of capital in that field in Switzerland we know of, maybe even, well, in direct air capture, it's the largest raise globally by a big margin. And you know, we have built 15 plants. We are the biggest company in the field. We're the world leader. So everything seems rosy from that perspective. But again, to filter gigatons, so billions of tons out of the air, this needs to become literally the largest industry in the world, right? So we have used oil and gas industry to put the hydrocarbons into the atmosphere. So we need something of equal size to take it back out. That's I think, intuitively logical. So we're on a good path. Also, I'm head of climate policy at Climeworks, so let me talk a bit about policy. We now have a $3.5 billion program in the US to buy down the cost of direct air capture. That's great. 4 years ago, again, we had nothing. But by comparison, Germany spent 150 billion to buy down the cost of wind and solar, right? So we're on a good track, but again, we need to strengthen our efforts here. And the most valuable thing you have when you scale a new technology is to just do it, just build it, can-do attitude, right? The data we have collected with these 15 plants is invaluable, right? Because we're learning every day, and that's also why we chose a modular approach. So we build many plants, small plants, fast. And our main competitor in the US, they need to build plants at the size of 1 million tons, and they use natural gas to desorb. So they haven't built. They want to build their first plant, but you know, we have been right with this modular approach. So start small is the message, and go for it, and can-do attitude, and move forward. With this, how do we want to move forward? So 15 plants in the field, lots of experience, ready to scale up. That's, I think, where we are. It's not easy. We will face challenges and problems, but we can only overcome these by doing it. And this is roughly our plan. So in 2024, we'll do a 10x and build a 40,000 ton plant, and then we do another 10x in 2027. Maybe we'll do a 25x because the government program requires you to build a plant that is at least 1 ton, or a hub that is at least 1 ton. And then we go into the multi-million ton range. That's the plan. Is this achievable as one company? No. Do we need an industry? Yes. We have now 15 other companies, startup companies, that have moved into the field just of direct air capture. There are many, many more in carbon removal. So again, it's last chance to make Paris, but it's looking very promising, we think. Now, let me just end by saying 2 things. So if you're interested, you can go to our website and you can support this. You can just have CO2 in your name removed from the air. And the other thing is, again, this is not a solution to keep on emitting. We can just make this if we reduce our emissions and remove the rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boitler. We'd like you to remain on stage for the panel discussion. And in this regard, I have the pleasure of calling on stage all the other panelists, starting from Onorevole Emanuele Bertoli, welcome, and Dottorella Antonella Santuccione Ciada, Professor Tatiana Volkova, Professor Marcel Tanner, Miss Alessandra Alberti, Mr. Christian Gattiker, Professor Claudio Boer, naturalmente anche Professor Giambattista Ravano.
Do I sit down?
Yes, please. Yeah. You remember where? Arriva. Yes, yes, please.
Thank you very much. Now we will begin the discussion, which will be an open, very open discussion. We all know that innovation is a capacity to people to successfully exploit a new idea. And sustainability in the innovation is to direct this new creativity idea into more socially and environmentally resilient form. But this put question on policy, political decisions, and managing. And therefore, we will put the first question to people that can answer on these arguments.
Thank you very much, Professor. And now I'd like to introduce you, our guests. Thank you very much for being here. Grazie mille per essere qui con noi quest'oggi per parlare con noi di temi così importanti. Onorevole Emanuele Bertoli, President of the State Council of Canton Ticino, Head of the Department of Education, Culture and Sport. Dottorella Antonella Santuccione Ciada, pro bono CEO and co-founder of the Women's Brain Project and head stakeholder engagement Alzheimer's disease at Biogen. Among all other prizes she received, in 2019 she has been elected Woman of the Year in Switzerland by the magazine Women in Business. Professor Tatiana Volkova, Professor of Strategic Management and Innovation Management at BA School of Business and Finance in Latvia. She has been intensively involved in delivering accreditation and evaluation of HEI on behalf of different accreditation bodies nationally and internationally. Professor Marcel Tanner, President of the Swiss Academy of Sciences. His research interests include the fields of global health, epidemiology, health system, infectious diseases, and public health. Among his notable work, Professor Tanner was instrumental in development of malaria vaccines. Ms. Alessandra Alberti, CEO of Chocolat Stella. Chocolat Stella has a strong focus on innovative processes and sustainability in all of the company's activities. Mr. Christian Gattiker, Director of Research at Julius Baer. Gattiker's research has included the analysis of global industrial sectors, equity strategy, and investment decisions across asset classes. Mr. Christoph Boitler, Head of Climate Policy at Climeworks. He has more than 12 years of experience in sustainability and is amongst the pioneer policy developers integrating climate science, mitigation, CO2 removal, as well as Power-to-X into European policymaking. And last but not least, Professor Claudio Boer, former Vice President of the SUPSI Board and School Sustainability, representative expert in machine and tool engineering. Professor Lavano, would you like to introduce the political point of view?
I have still said my 2 words in the sense that at the present time it is important to know the managing and the policy position. So it's right to put the question to our distinguished guest.
Onorevole Emanuele Bertoli, non possiamo che iniziare con lei per la parte politica. Lei è consigliere di Stato e presidente del governo del Cantone Ticino. La politica svolge un ruolo fondamentale nella messa in pratica di innovazione sostenibile a favore della comunità. A lei vorrei chiedere come giudica la situazione nel cantone in cui adesso lei presiede il governo. Cosa abbiamo già fatto bene, cosa dobbiamo migliorare, cosa non abbiamo ancora fatto?
Ma direi che più che governare la messa in pratica dell'innovazione sostenibile, la politica in un sistema, diciamo così, impostato in maniera liberale deve porre le condizioni quadro per fare in modo che l'inventiva, che l'innovazione, che la sostenibilità legata all'innovazione possano svilupparsi al meglio. Allora ci sono alcune condizioni quadro che sono già state in parte citate anche durante le discussioni precedenti. Una certamente è l'educazione. Io credo che da molto tempo nella scuola ticinese, ma nella scuola svizzera, nella scuola occidentale, il tema della sostenibilità e della necessità di un intervento sopportabile, diciamo così, da parte delle future generazioni, di quello che è l'impatto umano, sia tematica di fondo. E non credo che sia per caso che le giovani generazioni, quindi quelle che escono dalle scuole adesso, siano tra le generazioni più attente a quello che sarà il loro futuro, non solo perché li riguarda direttamente, ma anche perché nella scuola, nel sistema educativo hanno imparato che c'è un problema e che questo problema in qualche modo va affrontato e va tematizzato in maniera seria e approfondita. Poi la questione educativa naturalmente si sviluppa anche nella preparazione comunque delle giovani generazioni. Più noi abbiamo persone formate, più in qualche modo esse potranno da un lato rendersi conto di quanto è importante l'innovazione sostenibile e d'altro canto, come dire, partecipare in qualche modo, se hanno delle competenze, delle capacità, del genio, direttamente nel come dire, creare elementi che aiutano a trovare nuove soluzioni. E in questo senso posso dire che il Cantone Ticino, avendo comunque un tasso di persone che escono dal liceo più alto della Svizzera, maturità federale, maturità professionale più alto della Svizzera, concorre certamente in questa direzione. È un dato quantitativo questo, ma comunque è un dato che credo che abbia una certa importanza. Poi c'è sempre nel campo dell'educazione, della formazione e della ricerca, c'è il terziario e tutto quello che ruota attorno appunto all'investimento intellettuale sulla ricerca e l'innovazione. La SUPSI ne è un esempio con tutti i suoi dipartimenti, ma alcuni magari dedicati in maniera più particolare all'innovazione, che non è solo tecnologica, ma è anche rivolta a tutta una serie di altre questioni, di altri ambiti, ma lo stesso vale anche per l'Università della Svizzera Italiana, una serie di suoi istituti, vale in Ticino per esempio per la presenza del Politecnico Federale attraverso il Centro Svizzero di Calcolo di Lugano, che è un elemento estremamente importante che aiuta anche a ragionare sui sistemi e su quello che è possibile fare nell'innovazione. Poi tutta la ricerca ha bisogno anche di un sostegno finanziario e di sostegno infrastrutturale. Allora in questo senso ci sono una serie di programmi nazionali, ma ci sono anche dei programmi cantonali. Io penso per esempio, per quanto riguarda le aziende, alla legge sull'innovazione economica, alla politica regionale anche, che in qualche modo guarda all'innovazione sostenibile come elemento importante, ma anche alla politica turistica, a tutti i sussidi e i contributi che vengono dati per esempio in campo ambientale, ne abbiamo già parlato prima, ci sono quelli nazionali ma ci sono anche quelli poi decisi dai cantoni che sono complementari e si aggiungono a questi. E poi ci sono le varie infrastrutture. In Canton Ticino possiamo pensare per esempio al parco tecnologico, quello che arriverà poi domani a Bellinzona sulla nuova area lasciata libera delle officine di Bellinzona, che esse stesse si spostano in un nuovo stabilimento industriale all'avanguardia che vuole essere diciamo, proiettato verso il futuro. Quindi gli esempi sono molti, sono diversificati. C'è un elemento, io credo, molto importante, che è già stato prima sottolineato dalla consigliera federale, soprattutto per quanto riguarda il mondo universitario, la ricerca, eccetera. Il nostro link con l'Europa è assolutamente imprescindibile. E questo è un tema politico che dobbiamo risolvere, perché se non risolviamo quello rischiamo di avere un freno all'innovazione nel prossimo futuro in Svizzera piuttosto importante.
Grazie mille Emanuele Bertoli, e a questo proposito allarghiamo proprio lo sguardo sull'Europa. Dear Professor Volkova, let's continue speaking about innovation management. You have been studying and have been known for a long time the challenges and trends that constitute a coherent and productive approach of innovation management. How do you see the role of politics in the management of the innovation process carried out in European countries today? In other words, how do you see the role of governments in fostering and letting innovation develop, both in companies and in citizens in general?
Okay. Thank you for your question, and also good afternoon everyone, and it's my pleasure to participate here. Coming to your question, what governments can do in order to foster innovations on the level of companies and also involvement of citizens. These main directions where governments have to look at it's at willingness to innovate at the level of companies. And today we have learned it as well that willingness is rather high here in Switzerland, and it's also demand from society, it's rather high, but it's not enough. You need to develop also capacities to innovate, and as it was mentioned already, that the capacities to innovate, it's necessary to give necessary support to companies to develop their understanding, broader nature of innovations today, different sources of innovations, and also this capacity needs to be strengthened through targeted interventions, subsidizing, as had been mentioned previously by colleague, subsidizing research and development, and also universities to deliver a pool of talents which are working for companies as well. For example, helping to develop those and keeping these infrastructures in place. And this capacity needs to be strengthened also by opportunities to innovate. And these opportunities, like for example in European countries, there are many public procurements regarding those innovations that companies participate in public procurements and deliver their innovations to meet the targets set by those countries. Today, one of the colleagues here asked about rewards. Rewarding, it's another topic which governments can foster and also introduce different political instruments in order how to reward those companies who innovate and who delivers innovation. And meanwhile, I would like to say that understanding what innovation is requires also debate among public organizations and companies, because very often innovation is understood as a process, but innovation is a result of different processes run in the companies on different level of organizations, on public authorities and so on. It's networking, it's joint efforts in order to deliver those innovations, starting from idea generation and ending also with this delivering new significantly improved products or processes which make better lives and also contribute to sustainable society. When it comes to citizens' involvement, then educating young citizens already starting from kindergarten, understanding their role in delivering ideas and being willing to contribute to society and nature well-being. It's very important. And in Europe, we are already starting to prepare our active citizens from kindergartens, initiating different projects, giving prizes to those who come with ideas, some maybe even seed investments for young people in order to be active part in this innovation process.
Can you please give us an example where in Latvia? I mean, you're talking about Latvia,
yes.
Maybe.
Yes, and there are as well those business incubators which are working together with universities and with business companies and also with societies and local governments in order to deliver innovation by participating in different projects, of course. And governments are a big part of those discussions, and that's why this quadruple helix approach currently, it's a very, very facilitating tool in order to help this innovation happen. Recently, we started to talk about silver economy policy agenda and how to target more products for particular elderly society, and there are also big part of government's intervention and targeting public procurement towards goods and services for elderly people, which is also contribution to sustainable agenda.
Thank you, Professor Volkova. Today we also present projects developed at SUPSI.
Yes, it's the right moment now to see one of the projects of SUPSI that translates what il consigliere di Stato said. Innovation is not only technological innovation, and what you will see is a management innovation, if you want. Is a community organization around a new technology, but the innovative part is in fact the community. So we see, please, you can go on with the video.
Il progetto LEAC, Lugano Innovation Community, è un progetto pilota e dimostratore dell'Ufficio Federale di Energia ed è un progetto che si occupa di andare a validare algoritmi e modalità innovative di attuazione dei carichi all'interno di una comunità energetica. Una comunità energetica è una nuova forma giuridica che è possibile in Svizzera dal 2018 grazie alla revisione della legge sull'energia e fa sì che all'interno di un determinato spazio, che deve avere una continuità territoriale, produttori e consumatori possono mettersi insieme per poter autoconsumare energia rinnovabile prodotta localmente. Siccome la produzione di energia fotovoltaica non è direttamente controllabile, in quanto non si può accendere e spegnere il sole, quello che invece si cerca di andare a fare è di controllare i consumi, quindi di andare a cercare di allineare i consumi a quella che è la produzione fotovoltaica. In questo particolare progetto siamo riusciti a costruire una comunità energetica che ha 18 case, una scuola dell'infanzia, connesse tra di loro tramite la rete che prima era dell'azienda elettrica di Massagno, che adesso è stata scorporata. Quindi abbiamo una eterogeneità di consumatori e di produttori che si vanno a sincronizzare tra di loro. All'interno di questa rete abbiamo una serie di flessibilità. Abbiamo principalmente flessibilità termiche, quindi carichi termici importanti come pompe di calore e boiler dell'acqua calda, che sono dei carichi elettrici che si possono spostare abbastanza facilmente senza dare fastidio all'utente finale. Ulteriormente, per poter andare ancora di più ad assorbire l'energia fotovoltaica prodotta in loco, è stato anche deciso di installare una batteria. È stata installata nella cantina della scuola dell'infanzia e permette anche essa di consumare l'energia fotovoltaica quando nessuno la sta consumando, quindi stoccarla per poi rilasciarla la sera, principalmente quando la gente torna a casa. L'interesse anche dell'azienda elettrica in questo progetto è proprio il fatto che si riesce ad andare a permettere una penetrazione di fotovoltaico maggiore sulla rete senza dover investire in ampliamenti della rete stessa, perché se andiamo meglio ad allineare i consumi con la produzione c'è un autoconsumo a livello locale, non andiamo a usare i cavi dell'azienda elettrica. Per gli utenti che sono dei consumatori il risparmio si aggira attorno al 5%, con anche un potenziale di miglioramento abbastanza grande a seconda di come vengono poi controllati i carichi e la batteria. Per i produttori questo risparmio l'anno scorso si è aggirato tra il 10 e il 15%. La fase di progetto pilota si sta concludendo, però la comunità continuerà ad esistere, evolverà in un pilota di un progetto europeo, Horizon 2020, quindi ci sarà ancora una ulteriore sperimentazione all'interno di questa comunità. I risultati sono promettenti e si vede che c'è una grande potenzialità di ottimizzazione ulteriore all'interno delle comunità quando si va effettivamente a avere un controllo più fine su quello che sono i consumi. Ci si aspetta che un domani, anche con l'avvento delle auto elettriche che hanno una grande flessibilità, questo sarà sicuramente un tema importante che andremo ad investigare sempre più nel dettaglio.
Dr. Boitler, in your company you have had a lot of experience with similar projects and you are involved in implementing them. How do you see the relationship between these initiatives and the political and social organization of the community in your own experience? What other considerations would you like to make on this topic?
Yeah, so when our founders, Jan and Christoph, started this 13 years ago, basically everybody said this is impossible. This cannot work, right? It's not a new technology. It exists in spacecraft and U-boats, but to make it large and cheap, that's the task. And so literally everything we had to do didn't exist before. So lots and lots and lots of challenges, and what these two guys in the team did and is still doing is just incredible. But to zoom out, to give a very high-level picture, we've built our world on the free externality of CO2 or of emissions. So in our system, in our economic system, emitting is free. And we have to price that into the system so companies like ours can exist. So as has been said in the first talk, it's absolutely about policy setting the guardrails so these new business models can exist. I showed that slightly odd slide with avoided emissions, offsets, and reductions versus emissions. The only reason why this direct air capture can exist, I mean, it absolutely has to exist, science is very clear about that, is because policymakers have realized that the path that climate scientists show us, we have to translate into policy, and that's net zero. And from that stems, in our field, stems everything. Obviously, that's just the start of it. You then have so many different solutions that need different policies and therefore different innovative models where you can discuss for hours and weeks about how to foster them, but to stay with the initial idea is you just have to start. So I think also by just doing it, you show regulators and policymakers and academics that think about innovation what you need, because you don't know when you start.
In your opinion, Dr. Boitler, is current politics able or unable to meet the challenges the world faces right now?
I would describe myself as cautiously optimistic because, again, zooming out, we are trying to solve this problem about climate change. We have been trying to solve this in policy for the last 40 years, right? And we haven't been arguably super successful at this. But I think in the past, a lot of this has been based on abstinence, right? So not pricing in the externality, but simply not emitting. And as you will understand relatively quickly, diving into this topic, it is not possible to get to zero emissions. So what can you do to allow us some form of consumption, but that has not an impact on our climate? And that is, again, I think what has changed the outlook. So by having technologies like direct air capture, policymakers also have a way to say, well, we can make it. We can make zero. Well, we can't make zero, but net zero. And then you have a possibility. And I think this is what it's about, because every one of you, if you want to reduce your footprint, and I encourage everybody to do so, you will notice that on average you're 15 tons of CO2 emissions if you don't fly much. To get to 7.5 is relatively easy. You know, smaller car or just rent a car, take the train, shorter showers, off meat, and so forth. Smaller flat, but to get to 3.5 is already very, very difficult. And to get to 0 requires you to have some form of technology, some form of innovation to make it. That's it.
Thank you. We've spoken about political innovation management aspects, and now let's focus on the side of science and research. Professor Ravano.
Grazie. Devo ricordare che i autori di questi progetti che vediamo sono in sala. Quindi se si vorrà fare qualche domanda a loro, che sono poi alla fine gli attori principali. Yes, universities, we know that there are more and more called to answer to the local and regional government to answer their mission. And the discussion on sustainability in the university was always mainly gone through technology. But is actually no more the case, because we have to introduce changes in habits and society. That's the very important point. And the link between the two is a little bit flow. And perhaps we can discuss with our guest about this.
Yeah, let's start with Professor Tanner. With your comment on the chain between all the approaches, between scientific discoveries and innovation and the socioeconomic organization that accepts and values them, there must be a well-functioning transmission belt. The more so if in this production of innovation we want to emphasize sustainability. How do you judge the situation from this point of view?
Thank you very much, first of all, everybody, for all the inspirations we already got through the lectures and everything. There's a lot to say about this one. And particularly with the introduction, it's not so clear how this relationship is between science and policy and science and society. I would not just single out here as policy, it's also society, that we get things moving. I must say, I had the privilege and chance to work on this question already for decades, particularly in contexts that are poorer than we are here in our situation. And there, many things that are difficult here and why we discuss it, things are easier. And here, things are more complicated in an affluent society. So you may be a little bit surprised. Let me elaborate on that one. First of all, it took us, and I'm very glad that you use this word of transmission belt, because it's not just here is science, there is politics and policy, and there is the population. It is really this, it must turn all the time. And I'm very glad that we departed somehow in our settings from the old model whereby you had science finding out something, or some scientist made a recommendation, unfortunately called expert, because every citizen is an expert. We just have different expertise and experience, so it's no class society of here the experts and there the politicians. And we have actually departed from the point where one was no longer not respecting the transmission belt, but one was actually trying to make recommendation and then tell the politician take it or leave it. And it's in a situation where you not only have to do science, but where you have also to have an aim. Take the examples of the CO2. We have to do something now. And then actually a scientist cannot just say, I do my experiment, my project, and then later on I have my report, and then I want to do policy dialogue. This doesn't work. And I think what we learn out of that is, one, it needs an iterative process. From the moment that you actually start thinking about really creating, you need to have a contact with policy in an iterative process. Iterative process is not just a nice word, but this is a first step to sustainability. And I think this is very important. An iterative process that you bring in on this step from innovation over validation to application also allows you to take along the young generation, the whole training part. We have made a mistake very often in science that we had here is the science and there is capacity building. Wrong. You actually must associate on this transmission belt also the teaching and training part in order to really create not just a process, you could even say a movement. If we want to bring an innovation to the political level, to the society, we need a movement and not just recommendations and a policy dialogue. And I think this is what we learn as soon as we are confronted with issues that have to do with the survival of our planet. So this is something which we learned, the scientists. And this is actually the big issue, and not only because of Corona, that we are dealing with this in the academies, that we must, what do we have to change? The culture of science first. We first, as scientists, have to clean our house as long as we are, and of course this depends a little bit on science policy, but as long as people have to run for all this crap of impact factor, age indices, have a lot of products that they can do self-glorification. If we work for a society, we don't do self-glorification, but we are actually making a small contribution. And so the culture of science must change with all the good ideas, you know. If this doesn't change, we will never get that sustainability and all these noble aims that we have. And I think this is something which was very clear during the Corona pandemic, and I finish now, right now then, the Corona pandemic. The scientist has, at any stage of a problem, to say what you know and what you don't know. And out of what you know and you don't know, you create options for actions, not policy prescriptions. And that is what many scientists do not understand, that science must create policy-relevant statements and options for actions, but not policy prescriptions. Because as soon as you create policy prescriptions, look back to the Corona pandemic, we had a big bazaar of discussion with the politicians, that they said, you know, this is cacophony, these scientists, they don't know what they say, and so on. And this is actually, could be our best contribution to change this, this culture of science towards really becoming a partner on this transmission belt that knows roles and responsibilities. It's not on us in science to change the politicians, but I'm pretty sure if we behave like that, the politicians will also behave like that and will accept that we are sitting all on the transmission belt. We just need to know the roles and responsibilities. And it is really this transmission belt that is the way towards sustainability. And I tell you, as a last word where I started, this was actually what we learned much, much quicker in poor societies, where you have to bring science to the impact for the communities. Because there people have understood that you must walk from innovation over validation to application for the benefit of a society. Thank you.
Onorevole Bertoli, lei vuole forse commentare su questo rapporto tra scienza e politica? È stato fatto l'esempio naturalmente della pandemia, l'ideale sarebbe di andare a braccetto. Come giudica lei dal suo punto di vista anche riguardo la pandemia? Come sono andate le cose?
Ma mi sa che le idee diversificate, per non parlare della cacofonia di cui si diceva prima, ci sono state certamente tra i politici, ma anche, credo, tra gli scienziati, nel senso che i segnali venuti non erano proprio del tutto comprensibili. Ed era inevitabile che fosse così, perché si andava in tante direzioni diverse. Anche l'innovazione va in tante direzioni diverse e poi alla fine si concentra su quello che funziona meglio, che viene verificato come funzionare meglio. Per cui credo che forse è inevitabile che se accanto alla discussione a sapere qual è il ruolo politico e qual è il ruolo della scienza ci mettiamo anche la discussione pubblica e la qualità, a volte la non qualità della discussione pubblica, ecco, le cose possono anche complicarsi, però alla fine è importante che l'obiettivo effettivamente sia, come dire, combinato tra le scelte politiche e le evidenze scientifiche che man mano escono fuori, anche se escono fuori pian piano, una per volta, a volte in maniera anche casuale. Lo sappiamo, ci sono tante scoperte scientifiche che sono arrivate quasi per caso, ma poi alla fine si sono imposte perché vere, perché funzionanti.
Grazie. Dr. Santuccione, you have a very in-depth view, a very important part of innovation today. You can help us to look in greater depth at the role and the task of the new scientific developments towards innovation and sustainability.
Well, if I may, I think that where we have to certainly become better as scientists, as policymakers, and as citizens, because in the end, we are citizens. We are each of us making politics, and each of us has a level of knowledge in something. It is to plan ahead. I think that what our society, especially the Western society, has forgotten, it is the strategic thinking, which it's not 1 year, not 2 years, not 3 years, but it's what type of future, what type of world we want to have from today up to the next 10 years. And we have to do it in a very harmonized fashion. So I'm a profound believer that, as I said it in my talk, collaborations, exchanges, and reflection among different types of humans, it is the key to succeed. And even research, even scientific discoveries are certainly highly welcome, but we have to admit that there is part of the world that barely access them. So we have to be more inclusive. We have to be more harmonized, as I said, the long-term planning. I think that's a must. And we didn't see it with the pandemic. I have to say that as a European, as a person living in Switzerland, as a scientist, as a medical doctor, I've seen too many different approaches, too many short-term view and lack of dialogue across countries. I would have envisioned a strong European strategy to solve this pandemic as an harmonized fashion. So to come to an end, when I said that, of course, there is part of the world that doesn't access. I mean, let's think about vaccines. I mean, we have that majority of the world doesn't even know what it is a vaccine, right? And a colleague of mine, where I walk actually 2 weekends ago, is a neurologist. He was telling me, you know what, but that's not too bad. We're talking about this problem. Because if this will be the case, the health care system we face today, the medicine we know today in our Western society, will collapse the planet. It's not sustainable for guaranteeing this level of health and well-being for the whole planet. And us as Western people are a very little minority. Majority of the world doesn't live the way we do. They don't have the concept of democracy, well-being, health, the way we think. So to come to an end, where innovation should play a major role, it is to make those major discoveries and this well-being available for the whole planet. And I know that this is a bit of a dream and it's a big vision, but I think that's where innovation comes and plays a role. It shouldn't be just for an elected piece of mankind. It should be implemented on a broader level. And when it's about medicine and it's about health, we have a tool that we're not using enough. This is prevention. We know that we can prevent most of the chronic diseases, but we are not really educating to this preventive measure. I'm talking about, for example, again, Alzheimer's disease. This is my strongest expertise. Well, there are at least 12 factors that can be modified in the way we live to decrease the risk of having dementia when we get old. And these things need to be educated at school, because to take care of our well-being, brain health, mental health, it doesn't have to be when I am 70 years old. It should start when I am 6 years old. And this is where we have to aim. I give you an example. Diabetes, it's a risk factor for developing dementia. If we look at the way we treat our kids and we enter in a kiosk or at Migros, at their level, you will have sweeties and candies all over the place. Is this what we want for our society? Is this the long-term vision? It is the long-term planning? Is it the harmonized way? It is the preventive measure? No. This is the business, the return of investment, the way the society works. And I'm not criticizing. I'm saying let's be innovative and make innovation that will benefit not only part of this planet, because then when it doesn't work, we see what happens. Then a war starts. So I think we have to be, as I said, more inclusive, think long-term, and maybe more creative, but benefiting not only part of the world, rather the whole globe.
You underlined during your speech, you spoke about gender and sex differences. If you look 10 years into the future from now, what about this topic? What about your topic, your project?
Well, that's why we called it project. Because, you know, at the beginning when we started, they told me, Women's Brain Project. First of all, majority of the men couldn't pronounce it, because it's not like human project or men project. The fact of articulating Women's Brain Project, it's a difficult task. But nevertheless, I said, no, we have to call it Women's Brain Project, because we have to solve this problem that it is related to our brain. And so the specific of women. But project, because in 10 years, I want to have an end. I want this dialogue to be over. So that's why a project has a beginning and has an end. And this is why, when you ask me what will be in 10 years, this dialogue won't be existing anymore, because we have solved the gap in medicine. We have been able to address properly symptoms of female and men. We have been able to develop drugs that are more tailored for our patient, personalized precision medicine. And again, I believe that Switzerland can be really pivotal and pioneer. We have in the DNA of the people living in this country the concept of precision and punctuality. So let's deliver precisely and timely the solution to the patients we need. And we have developed most of the pharmaceutical company in this land. So this should be really easy peasy to do.
Let's hope earlier. Dear Professor Boer, you have a long experience in terms of industrial innovation, industrial products. That allows you to have a very complete view of the role that technical scientific discoveries play in leading to a really sustainable innovation production. Can you please tell us from your perspective when and where science can engage to drive innovation?
Yes, I have a little bit of advantage and disadvantage to be after some of the speakers, so I can take some hint from what was said and elaborate on them. But anyway, I always like to, particularly when I teach to a student, to leave them some kind of symbol. And in this first question, the symbol will be what has really the science and the technology brought into the innovation in our society. Our society is where we live right now. And because myself, I work mainly into the production technology, so where we produce our product that consume energy and then put the CO2. Well, the first one is right there. You know, this is the symbol of what? Information technology. This has revolutionized the way in which we design and make our product. Of course, we engineers, we cannot use very simple things like this to design a car or an airplane. We need something a little bit more elaborate. But trying to make the connection between the design part, and one of the tools that we use is called CAD, Computer-Aided Design. That is much more complex, but anyway, just to make it simple. And still today, after so many years we have evolved with this tool, our engineers, they use this tool for the design. For sustainability, almost nothing. So for me, if I want to see it in the future, I will try to see not a CAD, but a CADS, Computer-Aided Design Sustainability. That means every step that an engineer makes in designing product and processes has to have a kind of index of sustainability. Today, we don't have it. We can ask to many different companies, but we don't have it. So it's something that, if we want to look at innovation, like I was saying, just start with what we have today and make it in such a way they look at the right problem. And, okay, I think you have a second question that I will elaborate.
Yeah. We go. I think it's a nice moment to go to the second, to show the second project, where you will see it is an industrial project, very innovative. But you see that in the second part, very subtle way, there will be this issue about sustainability and in the sense of application of the technology to the people. And this will pose question. I don't say nothing no more. Please. Yes.
The Virtual Machina is a European project funded by AT Manufacturing, and it's a project about virtual reality in a manufacturing environment. The idea of the project comes out from the observation that in reality, when we have to do education, training, even practice in manufacturing environment, what we have is to have to deal with very complex, very expensive, and also very dangerous machinery and robots. So we decided to solve this project by bringing this in the virtual reality environment and creating simulations in virtual reality. And how we do this is thanks to a platform that we created that is called Virtual Machinery Environment, on top of which we create laboratories where we can simulate different machinery and different robots. And this is something that can be done even at home with simple virtual reality equipment. So in a very safe and not expensive environment. And in this way, the Virtual Machina is bringing three paradigms that are the learning for all, where everybody can create new environments on top of the VME and produce new simulations for different machinery. Then we have the access for all, that means that everybody is able to access any type of machinery because it is offered on virtual reality, and so it's not expensive, it's not complex, and it's safe. And finally, the feeling for all, because the Virtual Machina project also offers the possibility to follow the user and his experience and emotions. And in that way, the feeling that people are feeling when they use the machinery is collected by the environment and then is used to slow down or speed up the simulation. In the next year, we also introduced the possibility to do collaborative working. This year, we are continuing the activities of this project by bringing this experience to classrooms, so to a large amount of people in real time. In the future, the project is expected to also introduce aspects like privacy and security, which are paramount in cases of data collection like we do with the personal data with the virtual reality equipment, as well as the data that we can produce by using emotion recognition.
Sì, penso che avrete notato, you will have noted the two words access for all, which is under the project as a main streamline. In fact, now we are going to a point where which was when I was thinking about this forum, I was thinking this is the goal of the forum, to discuss with the economy about sustainable innovation. What is the concept for the companies, for the companies that produces services and processes? In fact, sustainable innovation contribute to sustainable business. It is not to me to say this. We will hear from our colleagues, perhaps. But sustainable innovation requires system thinking, and for this, I'm sure, must be embedded in the firm's culture to be taken on, and can create new products and services that serve the social needs and to the benefits of the environment for all. These concepts were not accepted for many years, thinking that the two are opposing, innovation, sustainability. I don't think it is no more the cases now, but I prefer to let it discuss with the innovator and the entrepreneur.
Would you like to launch the other video, maybe?
Right. It's before to discuss with colleagues coming from the economy. It is interesting to see a third and last project of SUPSI, which tried to see the temperature about sustainability, innovation in the company in our region, which is very interesting because shows what I have said before, that it is the time to think about this. Yes, please.
Il progetto Smart è un progetto Interreg che quindi ha visto coinvolte la Regione Ticino e le province di Como e Lecco. Si è svolto innanzitutto da settembre 2018 a settembre 2020 e aveva come obiettivo quello di diffondere il tema della sostenibilità e più in particolare della responsabilità sociale delle imprese proprio tra le aziende di questi due territori. Per fare questo abbiamo collaborato con diversi partner, per cui il progetto è stato supportato per quanto riguarda l'Italia dalla Camera di Commercio di Como Lecco, poi Confindustria Como, e poi abbiamo collaborato anche con il partner scientifico Green Bocconi, mentre per quanto riguarda l'area ticinese il progetto è stato supportato dalla SUPSI e poi dal Dipartimento Finanze e Economie del Cantone, e abbiamo collaborato anche con SQS, che è la più grande associazione, l'ente che si occupa di fare certificazioni su territorio svizzero e anche in Italia. L'obiettivo principale della ricerca era proprio quello di vedere il posizionamento delle imprese in Ticino e nella provincia di Como Lecco rispetto al tema della responsabilità sociale delle imprese. Abbiamo analizzato per questo più di 500 imprese in Ticino. Siamo andati a vedere come comunicano loro questo tema e ci siamo resi conto che c'è già un 23% di imprese che fornisce informazioni sul tema della sostenibilità. Certo, è un'altra cosa inserire il tema nella strategia aziendale. Un altro dato comunque positivo è che se andiamo a vedere le imprese con più di 50 dipendenti, già un quarto delle imprese pubblica il rapporto di sostenibilità, quindi questo è sicuramente un dato positivo. In Italia ci sono meno rapporti di sostenibilità, ma ad esempio sono molto più avanti in termini di economia circolare. La collaborazione tra Italia e Ticino sta portando, come dire, a una valorizzazione di entrambi gli strumenti e gli approcci. Le partnership con tutti gli attori del progetto Interreg stanno proseguendo, per cui stiamo continuando a fare formazione continua, stiamo continuando a mettere a disposizione delle imprese nuovi strumenti per implementare la responsabilità sociale nelle strategie aziendali. Ma ecco che il progetto Interreg ci ha anche permesso di conoscere il posizionamento delle imprese su questo tema e quindi ad esempio di poter collaborare con il DFE, il Dipartimento Finanza e Economia, per inserire il criterio della responsabilità sociale nelle imprese negli appalti pubblici, e questo credo che darà occasione di un grande cambiamento sul nostro territorio.
Sì, dovrei dire che le professoresse Assi e Giordano, che io perché non vedo tanto bene, ma o sono qui o sono giù, però possono anche loro poi rispondere a domande. E sottolineo anche le professoresse. Comunque, adesso
che sono qui, sono lì dietro.
Sono lì,
sì.
Non riesco a... Bene. Parliamo con le donne di impresa e gli uomini di finanza.
Sì, infatti, signor Alberti, la sua esperienza di imprenditrice ci è fondamentale per tutti gli aspetti che sono stati menzionati, e vorrei discutere con lei 3 aspetti, se possibile una definizione di innovazione sostenibile per le imprese. Vorrei anche chiederle in cosa si differenzia l'innovazione sostenibile dall'innovazione in generale, e anche come un'azienda deve intraprendere questo difficile cammino verso l'innovazione.
Sì, buon pomeriggio a tutti anche da parte mia. Grazie mille per questo invito. L'idea, I wanted to say some sentences in English, but my English is very different from this from Mrs. Santuccione, and then I decided to go with Italian.
You don't know my German.
No, in effetti l'innovazione è un tema del quale si discute da una vita, anche nelle piccole e medie realtà come in quelle grandi. L'innovazione è sempre stata fondamentale, senza innovazione non si può pensare ad un futuro. Ultimamente in effetti c'è anche invece il tema, oltre dell'innovazione, della sostenibilità, che va combinato con l'innovazione. In effetti non sono agli antipodi, ma sono 2 facce della stessa medaglia. In effetti è importante l'innovazione, ma è importante la sostenibilità che fa parte sicuramente della cultura aziendale, o che farà sempre più parte della cultura aziendale, e proprio quanto ha detto anche la professoressa Assi adesso in questo interessante filmato, indispensabile è questa collaborazione tra tutti gli stakeholder che abbiamo sul nostro territorio, dalla ricerca agli istituti professionali, alle università, ai settori innovativi, alle start-up, alle autorità. Questa collaborazione che è e sarà sempre più fondamentale per riuscire assieme a ricercare, a promuovere, a formare, a trasmettere questa informazione alle realtà industriali. Quindi questa interdisciplinarità sarà fondamentale sul tema dell'innovazione sostenibile. Anche per il settore alimentare o del cibo la sostenibilità in effetti è molto importante, proprio perché tutti i consumatori, la gente desidera sempre più un cibo buono, di ottima qualità, sano, sostenibile, etico, che è attento all'ambiente, che non crea sprechi, e quindi è tutto un equilibrio molto importante e delicato, non sempre facile nemmeno da raggiungere, perché in più questi prodotti devono essere poi, oltre che buoni, sostenibili e etici, avere un prezzo che possono essere poi proposti sul mercato, anche per le aziende che producono in Svizzera e che poi vendono nel mondo intero. Sappiamo che i prodotti svizzeri sono molto apprezzati, ma non a qualsiasi prezzo. Quindi tutti questi aspetti devono essere combinati e quindi la sfida è sicuramente molto importante, ma se un'azienda vuol pensare a medio-lungo termine, deve impegnarsi sicuramente anche nella sostenibilità. Nel nostro settore del cioccolato a livello svizzero sappiamo che il cioccolato è un prodotto molto conosciuto a livello mondiale, consumiamo però solo il 3% della produzione di cacao nel mondo, però tutti i produttori svizzeri si sono impegnati e fanno parte di una piattaforma multidisciplinare, questa Cocoa Platform, che raggruppa appunto la parte più scientifica, le scuole, la formazione, le autorità cantonali, federali e le industrie, le start-up, proprio per riuscire ad importare in futuro sempre più cacao coltivate da cooperative ecosolidali, quindi con l'obiettivo che entro il 2025 l'80% del cacao importato in Svizzera deve soddisfare questi requisiti. Quindi anche in qualsiasi settore dell'economia è sicuramente importante impegnarsi in questo settore, e anche per una piccola media realtà come la nostra, che produce in Ticino e esporta in 50 paesi nel mondo specialità di cioccolato, è importante impegnarsi nella ricerca di materie prime sostenibili, biologiche, fair trade, impegnarsi nell'aspetto dell'imballaggio. Adesso io qui ho portato solo proprio per avere degli esempi concreti. Siamo passati a produrre cioccolato che era unicamente imballato in alluminio, una volta era solo alluminio, c'è ancora una parte così, si è passato poi al foglio di polipropilene o PP per arrivare al foglio biodegradabile ma contenente ancora un po' di alluminio, e ad oggi stiamo utilizzando un foglio biodegradabile che deriva dal legno, che può essere eliminato in qualsiasi compostaggio familiare. Ecco, quindi anche le piccole e medie imprese hanno un ruolo importante assieme a tutti gli stakeholder che girano attorno ai vari settori della sostenibilità.
Giustamente lei parla di più stakeholder, si parla nel suo caso per esempio soprattutto del consumatore, ma quali sono gli effetti positivi anche sui suoi dipendenti, per esempio, se la sua azienda è sostenibile?
Ma sicuramente, prima di tutto, è importante, diciamo sempre che il successo dell'azienda è dato dal grande impegno e dal lavoro prezioso che ogni dipendente svolge nella realtà aziendale, e toccando questi temi si sentono tutti molto coinvolti, e quindi c'è anche un grande interesse a partire dal settore ricerca e sviluppo, che una volta era quel settore che creava l'innovazione, adesso è uno dei settori, perché parlando di sostenibilità o di innovazione sostenibile non è più solo il reparto ricerca e sviluppo, ma coinvolge molti più settori anche all'interno dell'azienda, e quindi si sentono tutti molto motivati a far parte di questo approfondimento che è poi il nostro futuro, per poi lasciare anche alle future generazioni un mondo migliore. Questo deve andare pari passi, appunto, come si diceva, con una concorrenzialità, perché si può creare dei buoni, bei prodotti, ma devono essere anche acquistati sul mercato, e quindi questo confronto è quotidiano.
Dear Mr. Gattiker, the point of view of finance is fundamental to harmonious economic development, and certainly finance has changed a great deal in recent years and has become involved in boosting businesses and innovations that respond to principles of sustainability. Can you please explain to us your views on the topic and in general those of the financial community?
Yes, happy to do so. I mean, we can state that the financial industry is struggling with sustainability, but I learned that politics is struggling too, and so is science, so I think we're in good company, and I'm pretty bullish, I'm pretty confident that we'll resolve a lot of the issues that are on the plate today. Let me also maybe start off with stating that there's a huge interest from clients for sustainable investments. I mean, I'm not surprised at all that Climeworks raised $600 million because Swiss francs, this is something which is at top of everyone's mind, especially because it's an impact investing. And that's actually where the problems already start. You know, if we talk with our clients, you know, they would like to have sustainable investment, but then we jump in 30 seconds into semantics. You know, what do you mean? What is your understanding? Do you mean by sustainable investment that you exclude dirty industry or certain unethical endeavors? Or is it about having a best-in-class approach? Or would you rather have something where the biggest progress is made? You know, which companies are actually kind of jumping in terms of getting more sustainable or making the society more sustainable? And this is exactly where we're looking for some standards at this juncture. And it's certainly very difficult to generate these standards. I mean, there's various levels. There's politics, and I think politics, of course, has a center stage, and I wouldn't blame them. It's highly complex, but it's about setting the playing field and giving the rules. And I think it's extremely difficult for companies to adapt if the rules change all the time. I mean, for those who've been following, you know, the CO2 certificate market, that was a first attempt, I think almost 20 years ago, to basically start kind of a market mechanism. But then if you establish this and then you change the rules to the game every other year, and you have these big swings, you know, it's very difficult for the corporate space to adapt. I mean, that's one thing. Then what we observe right now is something which is really kind of worrying us. It's the fact, I think it was alluded to by your question regarding the taxonomy. You know, this attempt of politics to steer the investment community by basically turning this whole sustainability topic into MiFID III. It's basically financial regulation. And you know, if you want to have an extra example, you know, after declaring nuclear power as a green energy, the next discussion we're having is that suddenly defense industry, weapon manufacturing is turning ESG compatible. Because of the S, there's a social benefit to that. So investors really have to make up their minds, you know, would you like to follow this kind of politically driven agenda by being then so-called sustainable in terms of your investments, or would you like to find your own path? And before I bash too much politics, you know, I also have to make some self-criticism here, because there's also a trend in the financial industry of greenwashing, which is highly, highly worrying, that basically people put the green label to everything that they already have on the shelf, just hoping for more, or kind of fill this demand that is out there. So you see, there's quite a broad range. I haven't even talked about rating agencies. You know, the Moody's and the Standard & Poor's and the likes, they started now to establish these ESG ratings. And believe me, you know, you can bet on it that, of course, Volkswagen was single A rated before the diesel scandal, and then they were downgraded to CCC after the event. And the same holds true for Vale after these scandalous accidents in South America. This was kind of a B rated and turned to a CCC. So you see, a lot of that is not really preemptive, it's not really kind of anticipating, but it's rather kind of declaring after the fact. And I think that's not really helpful in building any confidence there. So I think this is really where we are right now. There's a huge demand. There's people looking for impact investing. There's investors looking for opportunities, and I think we still struggle with having a kind of common denominator there. And on top, if I may kind of take this as a final one, then finally, after, you know, we decided what we understand and how we approach it, we have to manage expectations, because to my knowledge and from what I see, you know, this will not pay off necessarily, or at least not to the same extent as other investments pay off. I mean, my colleagues are here in the room from Julius Baer. You know, we were discussing that any sustainable investment fund, including ours, had a super hard time in the first quarter of this year, because the only thing that actually performed in the first 3 months of this year was oil, which is, I mean, we really have to stretch the sustainability label if you want to include oil in in your investment stance. So I think, you know, this is a rule of investing. The more restrictions you put on, the more you exclude, the less likely you are to achieve the same returns you get. And therefore, I think you have to be very close to clients and client expectations to manage this type of expectation mismatch, because a lot of people go around and tell the investor crowd that this is paying off, this is grand in terms of extra returns. I would tune this expectation down, and I would like to be proven false rather than expecting this in the first place.
Can you give us some reasons why investment in sustainable innovation respond to an economic logic and to a profit logic?
I mean, you know, innovation is what the corporate space was all about. You know, in economic theory, profits disappear unless you innovate and you get to the next step. And, you know, if you take the car industry, basically they were just able to keep demand going because they were able to build new features and more efficient, by the way, also more efficient cars So I think this is a given. The question is just, you know, how you incentivize the corporate space. And you know, we're simple people in finance. For us, it's about the price. And the question is, you know, what is the price telling you? How much is included in the price? Because the price shows you how scarce a good or a service is. And if prices go up, it actually gives a very strong signal to the corporate world that this is paying off to go there, to invest there, and to basically find something to lower the price. And this has been the success story of humankind in the past 300 years. And basically also, by the way, you know, if you take oil efficiency, you know, it took us 50 years to kind of come from 1 barrel of oil as an input. We made about $400 in terms of economic output in 1973. 50 years later, we are kind of getting out $1,000 per barrel. So this is all about efficiency. And maybe just to throw in kind of an example I like, you know, I don't know whether you ever flushed a US toilet lately. Probably not after 2 years of the pandemic, but I mean, this, you know, pushing the button in a hotel in Boston was really kind of mind-boggling because I thought the Niagara Falls were coming off, and this was 25 liters of pure water that just disappeared in seconds. And if I then go back to where Geberit is, one of the best companies in the world, I think, in this field, I remember my analyst going there to the investor day of Geberit, and he told me, you know what, the technicians there, you know, the research and development people, they were talking about the flushing goods. They were talking about goods there, and they were able to get it down from then standard 18 liters down to 12 liters, and they said they're confident that they're going to make it to 6 liters someday. And I can tell you, this is not about somebody deciding whether to flush or not. Every flush, or every time you flush, you use half of what you used in terms of resources before. I mean, that's the jumps we're after. And the question is, you know, how do we facilitate that? And I think Switzerland is a prime example. You simply have to have a solid set of rules, a stable ground, and then you better make sure that you can also preserve the wealth and reap the benefits and hold them. And I think the Swiss franc as a concept is one of the strongest ones, because we do the opposite of what everybody else does, weakening currencies, where companies are basically incentivized to go into mass markets, to go into low invention. Instead, we're basically raising the bar every year, and that's the enormous pressure we put on local companies to innovate and to get better and to get fit for a global competition. So that's all about what I can say to that.
Thanks so much. Thank you. I would like to thank you all for your contributions. Before opening with the audience, I would like to know if you have questions or comments for your colleagues on stage. Please.
Yes, I have one that is a little bit a follow-up of what was said before. Reduction of CO2, of course, we need to do it if we want to go to a negative. But reducing a CO2 that comes from a waste of energy, then that is a nonsense. I think you agree also with me, right? And I will bring you here the second symbol that I use also with my student, but it's a symbol that you have, everybody. These are the shoes. The shoes is a typical consumer product. And the way in which we buy shoes today is to go to a shop full of shoes, and we choose, and we hope that it will fit and are good. But they are produced today in a mass production. And the mass production is wasting energy. Because in order to have the market as much as possible and make the consumer happy, they produce more of what is needed. We have done research also in SUPSI that is 20% of all the shoes that are produced, and by the way, shoes, dress, everything, is 20% go waste. Now, you can recycle the material of the shoes, of course, but you cannot recycle the energy and the CO2 that is produced. So I agree with you that you have to, in a certain point, reduce the CO2 from air using this technology. But why reduce the CO2 that comes from a waste? And the only way to do this is to bring the consumer, that right now is at the end of the supply chain, if you want, is at the sale point. We have to bring it before. And this comes the relationship between the society and the producer. Because if we can bring the consumer at the beginning and tell to the producer, these are the kind of shoes that I want, and he buys before that they are made, then at the end, the producer will produce only the shoes that are needed. It's just a small example. Some of my colleagues, they know this because they've been working together. So it's very good to think about at the end, but let's also try to think all the chain that there is at the beginning. And technology there can help very much.
Professor Volkova.
Yes, thank you so much. I would continue, and maybe to give a brief explanation, if you could give your chocolate, please me. No, yes. This is a clear sample how...
Not all for you.
Yes, no. How complex innovation as a concept is. Because what was demonstrated, we clearly see here, it's a packaging innovation. Here it's probably this also business model innovation, value proposition innovation, partnership innovations, branding, marketing innovations, and many other kind of innovations. It could be recognized here. So we could see that it's a portfolio of innovations are needed in order to deliver this packaging innovation, which could be further used in order to promote this sustainable consumption and so on. And this understanding is a very broad nature of innovation and opening up new sources for delivering innovation, what we all have to learn from each other and to facilitate more discussions like this. And also for public sectors, there are so many opportunities to innovate. And I would maybe ask you to look at the Observatory of Public Sector Innovations. There are so many good examples mentioned by different countries how public authorities are innovating, like United Arab Emirates are having even Ministry of Possibilities. No people there, but they are coming together, all ministers, and discussing once a month or even more often about discovering new opportunities and proposing some ideas for execution. Thank you.
Professor Tanner.
I would like to follow these important statements quickly and to make a little bit clear also this question of not only the transmission belt, but it's the way from the innovation to the consumer. I think this is exactly also when we go more to where my experience in the biomedical field. If the scientist does not think the whole thing through, you may actually have an innovation that actually already in validation, and if validation is not properly done, you will bring something on the market that is actually not useful or not accepted by the population. That's why it is this issue that was mentioned, the collaboration, the transdisciplinarity, and so on is very important. And we have had actually, I take now one that has marked me a lot, an example. If you have a child with a cerebral malaria, then of course the child, you cannot easily in this child make an infusion, because that's a difficult one. All those who have done this with a child, you try everywhere, and until maybe it's not possible, the child dies. So some people have said, no problem, we can solve this. We take the drug and make a suppository instead of making it, and this is a very good idea. And then actually the scientists created very quickly suppository, going back to the chocolate. As you know, the basis for that one is chocolate butter for a suppository. But if you use it here in Switzerland, it's no problem. If you use it in the tropics, the mother has everything on their hands, but nothing goes to the child. And then the scientists again said, no problem, we are creating synthetic fats in order to increase the melting point, and then everything is fine. But if you go to a community and you don't think of how it is used, and after years that you have given things parenterally or orally, you suddenly come and you say you have to take this anally, then the community is not accepting it. So even if this suppository is technically fit, it is not accepted, and your effect on the effectiveness at the community level is nothing. And this shows you what was said, not only about shoes and everything, it's that we, as a scientist, we must think already the thing through and not leave it, think how it can be carried to the people who need it. And then we come also closer to sustainability.
And I bring back the example of the HIV preventive drug that I've showed. An HIV preventive drug developed in 2019 was accessible only to the male population because the scientists didn't think that maybe it would have been good to include also women in the clinical trial, because also women get HIV, by the way. And by this simple thinking and preventive strategy that goes back to putting the consumer at the upfront of the whole chain, you can really change the mindset. But I want to conclude with one thing. I guess that the main problem, it is the cultural effect. If we don't change the way we think, we're going to talk about sustainability for the next 100 years. So in the end, it's really us, the main actor, implementing the change and transforming things. And it goes with educating our kids and thinking this, as I said, strategy long-term and inclusive. Because the child with malaria gets malaria where? Not here. It gets it down there. And for this type of children, we need to think as well.
Of course. As you know, this is the thing we are all agreeing on. And I think this is not only the women that also get HIV, but we have in HIV, if you want to stay, and this is very important for you to know, in many of the drugs, there are no pediatric formulations for children. And people think you just cut your tablet and things like this. But if you really want to really have an effect, you must also think on such simple things. And this is just common sense. And you look how people live, and then you understand. Then you can generate the access for everybody.
And we need finance to facilitate it. So you need to explain this to your investors, okay?
Yes, yeah, we'll do so. Let me maybe add, I fully support this concept of having the consumer in the driving seat. That said, I mean, the latest wave of innovation just shows you actually that the consumer usually doesn't know if real innovation comes around, what they want. I mean, that was always Steve Jobs' a mantra that he would give what he thinks is the right thing, because people wouldn't even know that they could have their whole computer in their hands. And the same holds true for Tesla. where they basically came up with a concept that nobody could ever dream of before in terms of what the electric vehicles would do. So I think, this is real innovation is still a kind of magic.
Thank you. I would like also to open the discussion with you, if you like, if you have questions. Please, yeah, the microphone is there. Thank you. So if you can, please wait for the microphone. Thank you. Because for the translators, we need the microphone. Please don't forget to introduce yourself with name and function. Thank you.
Hi, Mauro Quadroni, funding partner from AI Legal and Strategy Consulting. First, grazie al panel per la vostra positività e questa bellissima discussione. My question starts with Mr. Boitler, but it then extends to everybody else. Boitler, sorry. My question is, who are your investors? Who were your investors in the last round? Because as we heard, it's difficult to have the consumer taking action, although everybody would like to have the consumer taking action. It is difficult to have finance if you don't have the returns, but you had a massive amount of investment. So I was curious, who are your investors? How can finance take agency for this kind of problems and facilitate this kind of solution so that they can make also life easier for the politics, which of course is at the center, but we all recognize the difficulties of, or the volatility of having to do policy where the main focus changed from month to month, and idea on a specific topic can change very quickly.
Yeah. So our main investors for this round is public. It's the Swiss Partners Group and a pension fund in Singapore, but there are others amongst them. And again, I completely agree with you. I think life's really easy for our investors because of the slide I've shown you, the second slide, which is the world map of net zero goals, right? So this is a long-term policy signal that these countries, and in the EU it's in law, it's enshrined in law, right? So are going to net zero. So do we know exactly with the Green Deal how this is, or with the Fit for 55 package, which is 55% reduction until 2030, how this looks like? No, we don't. But we know where it has to go. It has to go to net zero in 2050 at the latest, ideally would be earlier, and then net negative. So from that, yes, you don't have a regulatory prescription, but you can make up your own mind. And I think that's also on the customer side why we have Microsoft, Swiss Re, and other big corporations buying from us, is because they do understand climate risk, and they do understand, because we have the climate scientists that have established facts, what this means for society. So if a company like Swiss Re buys carbon removals, that gives you a signal that it's to protect their business case, and their business case is reinsurance, and that depends on a stable climate. So again, we get back to, do we think to the next quarter? Or do we think strategically as a company, as a society, and globally, and maybe to end, maybe we can see that everywhere, right? The example you gave, 1973, we generated $400 from a barrel of oil. Now it's 1,000. Well, in 1972, we had the situation where we had the most amount of energy available per capita in the US, and that has declined since, right? So we know where this is going. We've developed enough technology to suck hydrocarbons out of the ground, or take them with coal, and now we need to build more to get ourselves off that and our energy demands. That's the task. Obviously, it doesn't give you the exact specifics, but the direction is clear. Any company. This will be a compliance market. So any company that is not on track of reducing its emissions and finally removing the rest, you cannot invest in. And you see that with supplier relationships, where lots of big companies put that demand, obviously, onto their suppliers. So the direction is clear. Not the regulatory specifics, but the direction.
And do you need the regulatory specific, or do you see proaction from this institution that says, well, it's in our interest to think long term, and therefore we provide the finance for this?
Yeah, of course we need the regulatory specifics, but I think we have established quite well that we don't have the luxury anymore where the scientists tell to businesses and society, this is an invention we have made. We have gone from Albert Einstein to Elon Musk, right? And we don't have the luxury anymore to figure out, well, or to have prescribed the specifics. We have, unfortunately, all of us, you know, society, science, and businesses live in that uncertain world. That's why I look for long-term directional, strategic directions, I would say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments? Yes, please.
My name is Dragana Trajkovic. I'm a female founder of Mind Empathy Network from Geneva. I apologize for my English. I'll try to make a question to Mr. Tanner, like scientific. Usually we talk about sustainability, but I don't see any difference here in Ticino between sustainability and carbon footprint, or goal sustainabile numero 7 about energy, 7th goal. It's always, when we use this word, it's like a synonym of only the energy goal or carbon footprint. So my platform, I'm a founder of one new innovative platform for P2P, to make productive the social waste.
Yeah, but the
question. So I don't have the carbon footprint in my project, but I have 3 for another goal of a sustainable goal that I have like target.
No, thank you very much. If you ask me, I mean, this is, you can relax. I think first of all. First, and secondly, as you know very well, we have 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And we were, of course, now, given also the setting where we are and the innovations we discuss, we were a little bit too much, in your view, and we understand that, maybe only going in one direction of sustainability. But this is not the idea if you pursue, and you think that also for our country, Sustainable Development Goals, the 17, form the umbrella. And I can tell you, in the academies, we are actually prompting this discussion, again, before Corona, by saying the scientists should not just start to talk about that water is a problem, poverty is a problem, climate is a problem, biodiversity is a problem. They should exactly say, the Swiss scientists, what they in their position see as questions still to be solved. Not just discuss everybody a little bit waffling around about the problems of the world, instead asking precise research questions, what needs to be solved. So you can relax, that's why I say that. Because you have your platform, you have your way on making a contribution, and all make a contribution only, nobody solves it alone. Your contribution by answering a question that is important for our long-term future of our society. So really look at that, and really look at many of the products that are coming out, hopefully more. There is a broad way on people actually make contribution. And the important thing is, even if you are felt a little bit isolated, Sustainable Development Goal number 17 is about partnership. And we have emphasized this very much. We have all said, if we do not work together, if we just climb into our silos and then shout something out of the silo, then we are not contributing to a sustainable development. And I think that's why it is very important that you are not seeing sustainability as a synonym for one problem of our planet, but you see these 17, and you see actually that everybody can make a contribution when they really address it in the way that we have seen now some examples that were more on our climate side.
Thank you very much. We have the time for one more question if you want. Are there questions or comments? Also about the projects we saw? If it's not the case, we are at the end of our roundtable. Thank you so much. Thank you very much indeed for your contributions. It was a great pleasure. Thank you so much. And I invite you to return to your seat. Thank you so much. Now we'll try to summarize what we've heard. We heard a lot of interesting topics and touched on a lot of points. And then we will have a last speech and then a lighter note, a musical note. So please stay with us until the end. Professor Ravano was saying we touched on a lot of points. Would you like to try to summarize for the audience what we've heard today?
Yes, thank you. I see the people that are tired now, and I have to be very quick. In fact, very shortly I read books, and I read the book of Professor Einstein, the inventor of the theory of relativity, the one who said, yes, I'm thinking about 4 months, years, trying to take some conclusions, and I'm always wrong. At the last of the 100 of conclusion begins perhaps to be right. Per cui non penso che voglia avere tanta la prosopopea per rifilarvi qualche conclusione intelligente, però alcune cose si possono dire che forse si potevano pensare anche prima. Una è che effettivamente la questione della sostenibilità è inclusa nell'innovazione e lo era inclusa da sempre probabilmente, solo che sta galleggiando sempre di più per un movimento che è dovuto alla situazione anche economica e sociale che stiamo vivendo. Cioè in fondo non è nulla di nuovo, ma è qualcosa di più sottolineato. E la seconda è che il senso più aperto della sostenibilità include le persone, include il pianeta, include il profitto anche, e le 3 cose convergono sempre di più, come è ben stato detto da alcuni relatori e relatrici oggi, che sono evidentemente attenti anche a creare beneficio economico, oltre che al beneficio generico alle persone e al pianeta. E in fondo alla fine si riassume in questo. Noi abbiamo constatato che effettivamente il progresso ancora da fare è lungo, ma sta andando in questa direzione. E preferirei rimanere così, perché lascio le 99 riflessioni che faceva il buon professor Einstein a ciascuno, alle persone, da farsele per se stesso, e poi arriverà alla 100ª che probabilmente è vicino al giusto.
Grazie. Ci sarà ancora un momento di scambio, comunque dopo c'è un aperitivo sotto dove verranno presentati altri progetti, quindi anche lì ci sarà l'occasione di parlare di queste conclusioni. Now I'm very glad to call on stage Franco Gervasoni, General Director of SUPSI, to conclude our forum. Thank you.
Grazie molte. Non è facile dire ancora qualcosa dopo tutto quello che è stato detto questo pomeriggio. Comunque saluto tutti anch'io molto cordialmente e ringrazio moltissimo i nostri autorevolissimi relatori per quello che ci hanno offerto oggi pomeriggio, un pomeriggio molto stimolante e arricchente. Grazie anche naturalmente ai moderatori per aver stimolato la discussione. È un pomeriggio che ha messo in luce tante cose, io ne ho notate alcune. Ha messo in luce l'importanza di coltivare la capacità di innovare in tutte le accezioni del termine innovazione. Dico coltivare per sottolineare il fatto che è un atto che bisogna fare collettivamente e con un orizzonte di lungo termine. Ha messo in luce la profonda relazione fra politica, economia e scienza e la necessità di metterle in relazione fra di loro. Il nostro presidente delle Accademie delle Scienze parlava di cinghia di trasmissione attiva tra queste dimensioni, queste realtà. Ha messo in luce l'interdipendenza, ancora una volta, tra il livello locale, nazionale e internazionale. Ha messo in luce l'interconnessione crescente fra le discipline, anche quelle apparentemente lontane tra di loro, con la necessità di sviluppare coerentemente tutti i settori disciplinari e sviluppare coerentemente l'approccio interdisciplinare e interprofessionale per assicurare un vero sviluppo sostenibile della nostra società. Il pomeriggio ha messo anche in luce molto bene, da prospettive diverse, anche la responsabilità delle università nell'accompagnare la società nel suo viaggio verso il futuro. Un viaggio che si percorre e si percorrerà a crescente velocità, connotato dai cambiamenti e dalle grandi sfide che abbiamo toccato con mano anche oggi grazie ai nostri relatori e grazie ai progetti che sono stati presentati. Un viaggio dove dobbiamo essere anche sempre pronti a cambiare rotta, repentinamente. Eventi drammatici come l'esplosione della centrale di Chernobyl, gli attentati dell'11 settembre, lo tsunami di Fukushima, o quelli che stiamo vivendo in questi anni e in queste settimane, legati alla pandemia e alla evocata guerra in Ucraina, possono modificare in pochi giorni le politiche energetiche, le politiche di sicurezza, le abitudini legate alla mobilità, le strategie di approvvigionamento, le strategie di riduzione di dipendenza dall'estero, i flussi migratori e tanti altri aspetti che impattano in modo molto significativo la nostra società. E se un Paese riesce a rispondere con competenza, tenacia e resilienza a queste sfide e a questi imprevisti, questo dipende soprattutto dagli investimenti che ha fatto per sviluppare la competitività del proprio sistema universitario, assicurandogli adeguati finanziamenti, autonomia e quello che è stato citato più volte oggi, adeguate condizioni quadro. Il nostro Presidente Alberto Petruzzella ha ricordato in entrata come la SUPSI festeggi nel 2022 i propri 25 anni. Consapevoli di questa responsabilità, in questi 25 anni siamo cresciuti, abbiamo ampliato le nostre competenze negli ambiti disciplinari originari, abbiamo aperto nuovi campi disciplinari, curando costantemente il nostro prezioso profilo, il profilo di scuola universitaria professionale, attenta a promuovere i propri mandati istituzionali della formazione di base, formazione continua, la ricerca applicata e le prestazioni di servizio, con costante attenzione ai bisogni delle comunità professionali di riferimento, delle aziende, delle organizzazioni e gli altri portatori di interesse che compongono la nostra società. Cercando di evitare la trappola dell'autoreferenzialità, di cui anche si è parlato oggi, intensificando il proprio rapporto con la società e intensificando il proprio apporto alla società medesima, proprio nello spirito evocato prima da Marcel Tanner. Mi sono sentito sinceramente fiero oggi pomeriggio quando la consigliera federale nel suo intervento introduttivo ha dato valore alla capacità della SUPSI di cooperare e co-creare in rete, di collaborare con altre istituzioni accademiche, con il territorio e di far dialogare al proprio interno culture disciplinari diverse. Si tratta di attitudini non scontate, che sono entrate in questi 25 anni a far parte della cultura della nostra istituzione, grazie all'azione quotidiana di moltissime persone, alcune sono presenti naturalmente in sala, consapevoli che solo con questo approccio è possibile far fronte alle nostre responsabilità, ai nostri compiti con un orizzonte di medio e lungo periodo. Attitudini che permettono di realizzare insieme ai nostri partner progetti concreti e innovativi, testimonianze di sostenibilità applicate, come le iniziative presentate nei video dai colleghi e le colleghe Vasco Medici, Gianni Assi, Silvia Giordano, e testimonianze come quella nei progetti descritti nella pubblicazione sulla ricerca applicata, curata dai nostri servizi di comunicazione istituzionale e servizio ricerca, e che vi è stata trasmessa, consegnata oggi accogliendovi nel convegno. I progetti sono poi presentati nell'atrio tra poco. Un auspicio mi sono notato alla fine di questo pomeriggio è che fra 10 anni, guardando retrospettivamente al pomeriggio di oggi, potremmo dire di essere stati interpreti virtuosi della We Can attitude di cui ha parlato la consigliera federale, di essere riusciti a guidare noi stessi e le nuove generazioni, caro Luca, verso comportamenti individuali più sostenibili. In conclusione, ringrazio i nostri colleghi e le nostre colleghe dei citati servizi, ricerca e comunicazione, guidati da Suzanne Valaim e Irina Corti, per l'impegno profuso nell'impeccabile organizzazione della giornata. Ringrazio molto sentitamente ancora una volta i relatori di oggi pomeriggio per la disponibilità dimostrata nel condividere con noi la loro esperienza. Ringrazio Giada Marsadri per la brillante moderazione e ringrazio il vero motore dei 3 forum dell'innovazione che la SUPSI ha organizzato in questi ultimi 7 anni, il collega professor Giambattista Ravano, oggi anche nella veste inedita di moderatore, che nelle prossime settimane terminerà la sua attività in SUPSI per andare in pensione. Avremo altre occasioni per ringraziarlo durante i prossimi mesi, ma tenevo molto anche in questa occasione pubblica a sottolineare il suo straordinario impegno nel promuovere durante tutta la sua carriera, con il suo valore e con i suoi valori, non solo la SUPSI, i suoi ricercatori, i suoi docenti, i suoi studenti e studentesse, ma anche l'innovazione e lo sviluppo economico e sociale del nostro cantone. Sono certo che questo contributo anche in altre forme non mancherà nei prossimi anni. Ci hai aiutato, caro Giambattista, ad aprire i nostri orizzonti. Cedo nuovamente la parola a Giada per la chiusura, dedicando l'applauso proprio a Giambattista. Grazie.
Grazie di cuore anche da parte mia, è stato un vero piacere collaborare con lei, Giambattista Ravano, non è la prima volta ed è stato un grande onore. Grazie a tutti voi per l'organizzazione, effettivamente, thank you so much to our panelists, it was a pleasure to meeting you, to discuss with you, thank you so much. Grazie mille a tutti voi per la partecipazione. Quello che facciamo ora è finire in musica, il Conservatorio della Svizzera Italiana fa parte della SUPSI, quindi finiamo con la bellezza dell'arte, ne abbiamo tutti grande bisogno in questo momento. Ho il grande piacere di presentarvi il coro Clairiere diretto da Brunella Clerici che ci propone un brano, Venite Venite di Monteverdi, e poi ci ritroveremo qui sotto per un momento conviviale di scambio per scoprire anche tanti progetti della SUPSI. Thank you so much for your participation and attention and enjoy the musical moment. Penso che tornino. Li renderemo là.